Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Shea. Well, actually, you know what? Welcome to the very last day of Verge Virtual. This is our virtual live stream. We are at Sidebar. Cheers.
Cheers. We have our official Sidebar mugs.
Sidebar mugs. And in case you guys don't know what Verge is, it's our flagship event focused on the most promising solutions that are accelerating the clean economy. I'm Elaine Shea, the Verge Program Director, and your co-host at Sidebar.
And I'm your other co-host, John Davies with GreenBiz.
And welcome to the last day. It's our last plenary of Verge 17. And we're coming to you live from sunny Santa Clara, the heart of Silicon Valley in California. We are on a Sidebar stage, which is in the main room of all of our plenaries. And we're going to be here being the host of taking all of your questions during keynote panel discussions via Twitter and via our online platform, #Verge17. And my Twitter handle is @ElaineIsHere in case you have questions.
And we're going to be right back with an interview with Jeff Senney from PwC, so stick around right after this.
Stay tuned.
By 2050, we'll have 3 billion more people in our world, which means we'll need better solutions to manage our resources, sustainable solutions. That's where GE Ecomagination and digital innovation come in. Across GE, we're integrating hardware and software to reduce environmental impact while driving productivity. We're giving our machines a digital twin, a brilliant counterpart that helps us improve the world we live in. We're using analytics to let airlines around the world turn data into fuel and emissions savings. We've created breakthrough technologies that enable locomotives to move critical goods with less fuel to drive economic and environmental outcomes. And we're building a digital platform that improves forecast accuracy so wind turbines can generate more clean energy. At GE Ecomagination, we're using the power of digital to continue building partnerships and creating ideas that move us even faster towards a cleaner and more connected future. This is just the beginning.
Welcome back to Sidebar. I'm here with Jeff Senney, Corporate Responsibility Strategy and Implementation Leader for PwC. Welcome, Jeff.
Hi, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
So, Jeff, the last couple of days, one of the big conversations here at Verge has been about equity and resilience, and I know PwC has a real big strategy focus on social equity and resiliency. Tell me a little bit.
Which is a commitment to youth education and financial literacy. And on top of that, this year we made a new commitment to technology skills. So we see that people in the community need the skills to manage their financial future, but they also need the skills in order to ensure that financial future. And beyond that, we look at the foundations of resilient communities, that you can make money and manage it well, but if you don't live in a community, one of the things I like to say is that your zip code should mean zip, and sadly it doesn't. All too often. Where you're born and the conditions in which you're born in many ways determine the outcome. And that is very much an antithesis to this kind of American dream, rags to riches idea that we've all kind of grown up with. And we want to make sure that America kind of fulfills its meritocracy kind of origins and provide people the skills and the tools that they need in the communities to be successful.
So I think one of the things about this program that I find really interesting is how much this has been very engaging for all the partners and the people at PwC. So any good stories about sort of inspiring them to go out in the community and help with this work?
Yeah, luckily, you don't really have to do much in terms of inspiring them, just empowering them, giving them the opportunity. So we have, for example, unlimited volunteering. You still have to do your job, you still have to show up, you still have to meet the metrics necessary for your position and the performance expected of you, but you can spend whatever time you'd like to in the community, and we see that as a business win as well. We're developing relationships, and our business thrives in communities that are thriving. So we see this as not only a way for people to live their passions, but also develop new and different skills. So one of the programs we're working on right now is how can we take our technology skills into the community to help individuals and organizations become more tech aware and more, deploy more technology solutions. And in doing so, we become better at that as well.
So 2 days ago, Van Jones was on our stage talking about ecological apartheid. And specifically, he started his career at the Ella Baker Center, as you may recall, about 15 years ago, talking about green jobs, not jails. Joel was talking about it's full circle now with their Cut 50 campaign and their Ban the Box campaign, basically how those who are formerly incarcerated just don't get a chance. And this whole second chance idea for these folks who would be pretty productive members of society or relatively disciplined, want to do better, are not given the chance. Are you guys working on anything systemic in terms of that equity issue?
That's right. I think those are excellent points. I was just in another session where we talk all too often about the digital divide, and it's hugely important, but there's a food divide and a water divide and a clean air divide. And what we can't have is these kinds of divides based on, I don't know, I'd use the term ecological apartheid, right. But it's quite powerful when you think about it, because we really do have this it's not a two-party system, it's a have and have not system. And I think in many ways the biggest issue we have in the sustainability space is eroding trust and inequity. And to the extent that we can make sure that our solutions, which we were just talking about smart cities, and how we need an interdependence of the cameras need to talk to the microphones, which need to talk to the smart meters, but do we do the same in our lives? Do we talk to people who disagree with us? Right. 53% of people do not seek out differing opinions, and in fact they watch a news outlet or they watch they listen to voices that reinforce their opinions rather than challenge those positions, and I think we need to kind of break that mold.
So does PwC have any initiatives that are seeking to address some of these issues?
The resilient communities is exactly that, where we're trying to look at interdependencies between kind of people and systems and figure out how those can serve all for the betterment. And I like this idea of it's not equal for everybody. If you're already 6 feet tall and the fence is 5 feet, you don't need a ladder to stand on to see over it. But if you're not 6 feet tall, you do need a ladder. You do need a step stool to be able to see over it. And so it's not everybody having equal, it's everybody having an equal chance. And sometimes that means, and we think of this very naturally with people with learning challenges, that we give them extra help. But I think the same is true in underserved communities, that we need to invest to give those people an equal chance to succeed. And that might be more infrastructure, that be more investment. But that's what is going to give us all the best outcomes, and I think it's for the betterment of everyone in the system. Only 15% of people, the Edelman Trust Barometer, which I was recently reading, only 15% of people think the system is currently functioning.
Wow.
That's quite quite startling. And I think everybody would look at maybe why it's not working in a different way. But it seems like we have broad consensus that something needs to change, and yet we don't seem to find it. So we're trying to find very practical solutions to use the scale and the scope of our company to make a difference.
Well, good luck with that. We look forward to following how that progresses.
Thanks so much.
It's a great initiative.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
So stay tuned right now. We're going to go straight to the main stage.
Thanks, man.
Good to see you. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage GreenBiz Chairman and Executive Editor, Joel McCower.
All right, good morning, everybody. It's Thursday, it's the home stretch. Let's have a good morning. Good morning. not too bad. Let's do one more. Good morning. I love it. And on top of good morning, Shana Tova. It's a Jewish New Year, 5778. So for those of you who still are writing checks, make sure to change that as you go forward. Another great day. Let's turn right to Elaine Shea at Sidebar. What are you excited about today, Elaine? What's going on?
Well, I always love the last day. This is a shortened plenary today, so I'm really excited that we've jam-packed it full of really cool stuff. This afternoon is actually a VIP summit working session on urban mobility systems. So there are a lot of challenges in cities around mobility, and so today's theme is really around all of the interesting things that are happening with connected transportation and mobility services and how that interconnects with all of the other verticals that we have, including energy and cities and buildings, et cetera. And then we're also kind of getting into the idea of what can we do? How can we act? When we get out of here, what are we going to do that's going to be different? How are we going to change our mindsets? How can we transform the market? So there's going to be a lot of solutions-oriented action, and we're going to hopefully end it with some really inspiring solutions from Lisa Jackson.
Great, thank you. Well, speaking of mobility and driving change, let's bring up to the stage the General Manager of Renewable Energy for General Motors for a special announcement. It's Rob Threlkeld. Rob?
Thanks, Joel.
So just this week, General Motors, made a pretty significant renewable energy announcement. Give us the gist.
Yeah, so we announced two 100-megawatt wind deals, one in Ohio and one in Illinois, that are going to power our manufacturing facilities, all of our manufacturing facilities in Ohio and Indiana. But I think some of the neat things located with that, in fact, I just got off the phone with our engineering director in Defiance, Ohio, asking about the wind farm and the fact that they can see wind farm and turbines out in the distance. And is this wind farm going to power the company there? And I said, well, no, but it's one that's just literally a stone's throw over from that one. So the excitement, I think, of how sustainability is being ingrained into our business as a whole.
So that's the what of what you did. How did you do that? What did it take? What kind of constituencies, partnerships did it take to make something like that happen?
Well, I think the key thing and a takeaway is to, as much as you externalize the story, you really need to internalize the story. It's not about going out and building a massive energy team to go do these. In fact, when I sat in front of our CFO, he says, don't make this a massive project. And it really is leveraging the internal resources that you have as a company. You've got treasury, finance, accounting, they're all experts in their field and their spaces, and it's really internalizing all the efforts that we're doing as a company and how sustainability is really ingrained into the financial components of what we do.
So General Motors have made a commitment to get to 100%. Is there, I can't remember, is there a date?
Yeah, 2050 we've made that, yep.
2050. So to get there, from here to there, and you're taking this project as an example, is it kind of just rinse and repeat? Do you just sort of replicate this elsewhere, or is it each one its own, in sort of, pardon the expression, but inventing a new wheel?
Well, it is really actually setting up a process. So I took our global manufacturing system, how you basically build an automobile, and the process and how it goes down an assembly line, into how you actually approve a contract. There's a whole process that goes through with that, and replicating that. It's almost like the conductor of an orchestra. You pull into different components of the business that need to be included at certain times so that you're really efficient in trying to get it done. So when we did our first wind announcement, it took about, our first wind PPA that we did in Mexico was about 18 months. The most recent two 100-megawatt wind deals, which were 10 times the size of the original one, which is 30, now we're talking 200, were done in about 4.5 months.
Wow, and so where do you go from here? What's next?
Next is basically getting to the company to 100% renewable energy, looking at our global operations. We're on a track to build about 45 of our 90 megawatts of solar on our rooftops in our China operations, and really taking that scale and moving it forward, and sharing a lot of our best practices with other companies that can do this space as well.
Is it different in China? What's the big, the special challenge there?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge in China, in our case, was working with our joint venture partners. We're all joint ventures, and getting, you really got two sides of the companies you got to approve when you get these deals types of arrangements done, and getting that type of, so you're really doing it twice, but once they do it quick, because then they scale up fast.
Okay, well, you're scaling up fast, and I think it's really exciting how you're doing it, but also your willingness to share sort of the, not just obviously the what, but the how and the why of what you're doing. So thank you for doing that, and congratulations on the new project.
Joel. You bet.
Rob Threlkeld.
Thank you.
We're going to move into the first Verge talk of the day, and we're going to pick up on the theme of energy inclusion and equity, and in some ways pick up where a couple of other panels, Van Jones and the great panel that Michelle Moore did yesterday, left off in terms of how do you democratize clean energy? And in this particular case, what's the role of electric vehicles in enabling clean energy to become available to everyone, everywhere, at any income, just inclusiveness, as we say. And to talk about that is somebody who has really shown the way, really taking the visions of Van and others, and on the ground level, making these things happen. I'm always love to hear Holmes Hummel talk about what's latest and greatest. So please welcome to the stage the principal of Clean Energy Works, Holmes Hummel.
Thank you, Joel. Appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. I love being at Verge. I love Joel's vision for bringing us together to think about investing at the intersection of sustainability and technology. As one who joins you in that pursuit, it's certainly an honor to be here to share some insights of experience. About 5 years ago, I was still at the Department of Energy when the International Energy Agency came through with a blunt proclamation. They said, look, we need to completely eliminate fossil fuel use by the year 2075 worldwide. Well, friends, that's within the span of my lifetime. And I thought to myself, wow, and what else? Oh, they said, there's more. We need $1 trillion of clean energy investment every year for decades. That all? Oh, no, there's more. We actually need, in order to get to a 100% fossil-free future, some way to reach everyone, everywhere, because we can't reach 100% with only half the people. Now, you heard how we have struggled with economic inclusion, and I've given that some thought. Why is it that we struggle on that front? One of the reasons is that financing policies are a very powerful tool for mobilizing capital, but they also control who has access to it. And for good reasons, common financing instruments like loans and leases systematically disqualify people based on criteria like income, credit score, renter status. That's why I was captivated by the report of a national lab that found in Kansas a working model of a more inclusive financing solution called Pay As You Save. It allowed the utility to offer a terms of service agreement that would allow the utility to invest in anything on the customer side of the meter and make that option available to any customer, regardless of their income, credit score, or renter status. I recognize that as having the potential to bridge the clean energy divide and unlock untapped potential in the markets that we really needed to get to where we know we need to go. Why do I find that so compelling? I think our challenges require a rapid response. And in order to get to scale and speed, we're going to need something approximately this size, the size of the electric power sector, so big you can see it from space. Now that becomes handy when you start to see two convergent trends on the horizon. One is more field experience that's inspiring confidence in inclusive financing using utility business models. And two is the plummeting cost of batteries that's drawing electric vehicles closer to cost parity with their fossil fuel alternatives on a life cycle basis. Here, I want to show you why I think this is compelling by giving you both a bird's eye view and then a specific example. Here you see the federal outlook for the carbon footprint of the energy sector in the United States. And this, you see, is the 2050 target if we want a hope of stabilizing warming at 2 degrees. How do we get from that top line to the dash line, driving 80% of the carbon out of our footprint? Well, you can start by shutting down every fossil fuel power plant in the country. You'll get that far. Virtually every scenario for stabilizing climate change next requires driving oil out of the transportation sector by driving vehicles into the electric power sector. It accounts for about 2/3 of the distance between that green line and the red line. Well, what is that really worth to the utility sector? Well, the Brattle Group expects that just the electrification of the transportation sector could double the outlook for annual sales growth for utilities. It's worth hundreds of billions of dollars, a growth opportunity coveted by utility CEOs everywhere. So EV transit, it's a good opportunity to go from 1% of market share to saturation. And we want the power sector to be that successful. Currently, we are relying on customers to cobble together rebates, loans, leases, and tax credits in order to fuel our sales. Utilities do want to make it easier. They keep proposing to try to defray costs on the customer side of the meter. But sometimes they're inclined to propose that they should have expenses that are spread across everybody or extend their monopoly, equally objectionable and unjustified. That's why I'm interested in innovative financing solutions. And I think that we should actually look at a case example. This is, let me see if this is an electric transit bus. And electric transit buses are actually a great place to start. Big batteries, big fleets, relatively small number of players, a relatively simple transaction path. What's more, utilities that look at transit can help cities achieve their own objectives of leadership by example. By ending the purchase of diesel buses, stopping fossil fuel infrastructure investments today that just become stranded assets and liabilities tomorrow. This bus is in Louisville, Kentucky, where the general manager is a veteran of the business, Barry Barker, a business-minded executive with a commitment to sustainability and community engagement. Mr. Barker managed to buy his first round of electric buses using the support of a Federal Transit Administration grant program. Dozens of cities tried to follow his lead, and many of them have filed similar applications. But for the last 2 years, that program has been oversubscribed by a factor of 10. The sobering result of that is that in that 2-year period, we've had nearly $1 billion of additional investment in clean transit that's been denied. Here's the challenge that cities are facing. Clean transit buses cost 50% more up front than their diesel alternatives. But they also come with a 500% improvement in fuel economy, topped off with additional savings in maintenance and operation that actually give them a lower cost overall. That's the savings stream that give you a clue that a financing solution could work. So I went to Mr. Barker and I said, what would you say if you could work with your utility to buy all of the buses that you want that are electric and zero emission for the same price as diesel without taking on additional debt or scaling back your service and sacrificing your performance? The next time the utility had a rate case, there was the city of Louisville making that proposal. And now the two of them are working together to explore it. You see, the utility can actually leverage its tariff authority. Using its business model in a new and different way, it can unlock that potential. I want to describe how it works. Pay-as-you-save, this inclusive financing system, allows utilities to draw in large amounts of low-cost capital and devote it to investments on the customer side of the meter that are cost-effective, like big batteries on clean transit buses. That investment is then associated with the utility's meter, and through a terms of service agreement, the utility can recover its costs with a charge on the bill that's less than the estimated savings. When all the costs are recovered, the utility ends its charge, and the asset belongs to the customer. Friends, here you have a situation that allows the utility to participate in the transaction, but also maintain consumer choice and open competition, to align benefits and burdens at the place where the upgrades are installed. The pay-as-you-save system actually has a track record in the field that spans more than a decade, associated with energy efficiency upgrades in the real estate sector. Utility CEOs like Mark Casey, who spoke from this plenary stage yesterday, have reported that when you introduce pay-as-you-save inclusive financing, it results in a surge in investment related to unlocked market potential that brings in benefits locally, both to customers and to the utility itself. I founded Clean Energy Works after leaving the Department of Energy to accelerate investment, so we've helped multiple utilities both evaluate and implement this solution. These days, you can find working pay-as-you-save programs in Kansas, Kentucky, Arkansas, North Carolina, and New Hampshire. Also, in the last year, California and New York have both had top policy panels recommend introducing pay-as-you-save in their states. I want to go back to the big picture before we close, though. Because Verge is about opening doors, opening minds to transformative, practical, scalable solutions. And when Van Jones spoke passionately when we gathered here first on Tuesday, he drew to attention the disparity that we can observe in the clean energy economy that he akin to apartheid. I think it's time for frontline communities to be at the front of the line for investment. And clean transit is a good business case. It's a great place for utilities to get started, but it's just a gateway that allows them to get comfortable mobilizing more investment to accelerate investment in electrification that benefits us all. Maybe I'm a dreamer. Utilities are known for being allergic to innovation, I know. But I can't resist the effort to try. Because here's why. What if it works? What if it works on this kind of scale? We have the opportunity to harness the self-interest of the utility industry to unleash its unrivaled capacity to mobilize capital at a scale that matters and a time frame that makes a difference. And in my view, it can't happen fast enough. But the utilities aren't going to be able to do it by themselves. Many of them are hamstrung by utility regulators on one hand and investment analysts with 90-day earning reports on the other. That's our chance to contribute. That's our opportunity to be good news messengers. How do we engage institutional investors, regulators, utility executives, frontline communities, fleet owners? I'm interested in what you find is your opportunity to contribute to the realization of this breakthrough potential. Clean Energy Works is dedicated to helping you take a next step in that direction as we all strive to answer the calls of our time. Thank you. Thank you.
What's always so exciting and fun and important is not just people with great ideas, people who know how to articulate those ideas, and people who do that with passion and who really bring to it that other ingredient, heart. And Holmes is all about that. And innovation, the kind of innovation that we're talking about, we're going to pick up and continue that thread about innovation and the grid and which powers the other, innovation powering the grid, grid powering innovation. To unpack that riddle and lead that conversation, I wanted to welcome to the stage a terrific friend of GreenBiz, helps us put together and instrumental with our Verge Hawaii event, the CEO of Elemental Accelerator. Please welcome Don Lippert. Thanks, Don.
Thank you. All right, come on out. Good morning. So we're delighted to have some real leaders from innovation and the grid with us this morning and to hear what's new, what's happening, and how we can all get involved. So I'm going to actually ask each of our panelists this morning to just introduce themselves and tell us what's top of mind for you also. Karen, can you start?
Sure. My name is Karen Wayland. I'm the very new executive director of the Clean Energy Project, which is a nonprofit in Nevada that advocates for clean energy policy, both in Nevada, the West, and hopefully more nationally going forward. And I just joined after spending 3.5 years working at the Department of Energy, where I established the state and local policy team for Secretary Moniz, and I also was one of the lead authors in the 2 installments of the Quadrennial Energy Review, where we looked at energy infrastructure around the country and what the challenges and really exciting opportunities are in that space.
Hi, I'm Denny McGinn. I'm a recovering sailor. I left the administration as Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Energy Installations and Environment in January. There's some sort of a change happening in Washington. And now I'm a member of the Board of Directors and Senior Advisor for Customer First Renewables, a strategic energy advisory service that focuses on the customer to get everybody into large-scale renewable energy. Look forward to having a chat with these great folks.
Perfect.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Steve Melnight. I run a team at PG&E called Strategy and Policy. PG&E is you probably know, we're a gas and electric combined utility across northern and central California, covering about 70,000 square miles, and very proud to be the home of probably about 25% of all the nation's rooftop solar installations and 20% of all the electric vehicles charging off of our network.
Terrific, thanks. Those are some good things that are top of mind. So this space is changing very quickly. I'm from Hawaii, so in Hawaii, for example, we went from about 8% renewable energy 9 years ago to about 27% today. So really extraordinary growth, and our biggest power plant in Hawaii is distributed solar. So how do we sort of go from a place where we have power plants to solar and distributed energy across the grid? You have to have innovation, right? I mean, you have to be able to incorporate new technologies and new ideas and new ways of thinking, in particular, into institutions that manage the grid. So we're going to talk a little bit about how the grid powers innovation. And Steve, I'd love to start with some of your thoughts around actually what you guys are doing. Do you think that the PG&E grid powers innovation, and how so? Can you give a couple examples?
Well, you know, I think that, look, you talked about the transition that's underway, and it's an incredibly exciting time in the electric industry and an exciting time here in California. So we sit here today with about a third of the energy that goes over our system from qualifying renewables, but also really importantly, that's about 70% greenhouse gas free. So when we focus on the objective of trying to drive down carbon in our economy, lead the way on carbon reduction across all of California, you know, the electric sector here is pointing the way to success. We've got significant deployment of grid scale renewables. We have traditional clean energy resources that continue to provide. And at the same time, we're seeing a transformation where really the customer is coming to the table and is becoming an equal player, not just a consumer or an off-taker off the grid, but is really an equal player now. The 300,000 rooftop solar systems that we have in our service territory are just sort of scratching that surface, because when you think about it, a rooftop solar system under today's sort of structure and market is a great way for an individual customer to see the benefits of, you know, reducing their grid needs and generating their own clean energy. That's a great thing. But when the entire model of the grid is the idea that when we connect to each other, when we build an integrated network, we can achieve more benefits for all of us through that network and that integration. And we're now on the cusp, I think, of understanding how do we unlock the value of these distributed resources beyond just what they may be for an individual consumer. You know, a storage system today in California, while we've got some really integrated, interesting and exciting new technologies, fundamentally, if you're a residential customer in California, you're not really likely to want to buy a storage system unless you just want one, because the grid is a free battery for you. You know, if you have excess energy to generate in the middle of the day, you push it onto the grid, you can take it off whenever you want. But as we start to think about how that system could drive grid value, there's huge opportunity. And I want to mention one quick pilot we're doing in San Jose. So in San Jose, we're putting together virtually all these technologies together. We're partnering with Tesla, Green Charge Networks, and GE. We're putting together solar, smart inverters, storage at both homes and commercial centers, and we're using GE's DERMS system to actually manage all these things collectively now. So for the first time, I think, in this system, we're truly seeing what the grid of the future is, how these distributed resources can actually play and contribute to solve for a bigger problem. It's incredibly exciting. There's so much opportunity in front of us, But we also have to recognize that while markets move at the pace of innovation, oftentimes in the electric sector, we move at the pace of regulation. Slightly different pace. And we got to work to bring those two together so that we can actually unlock all that value.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought up pace, and I think also we want to talk a little bit about how to scale, right? Because I think pilots are really important. We fund a lot of demonstration projects in Hawaii and across the Asia Pacific. We really believe in the need to show things, technology in action and get measurable impacts and metrics. But it's also about how you scale that up and actually integrate this into networks. And you guys have really been thinking a lot about this in Nevada and throughout your work.
Well, in fact, that's one of the reasons we host the National Clean Energy Summit every year. And this year's theme is integrating innovation. And the reason I chose that theme was exactly the issues you have, which I think the electricity sector in particular is, there's more innovation coming online or coming out there and is available to use than in almost any other sector. But the question is, how do you actually integrate it into existing incumbent systems? And there are institutional issues, there are cost issues, there are basic regulatory issues. I mean, there are things like a smart grid or a smart meter. You put a smart meter on your house, and it is possible that in a year or two that smart meter is outdated because the technology is changing so quickly. So how do you actually recoup the costs of a technology that's obsolete in a much shorter time frame than what a utility is used to dealing with? And then how do you do that integration in a way that actually allows you to take full advantage of the benefits while protecting your system against some of the threats that some of these new technologies raise?
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts about how specifically to do that, especially around this question of short-term investment, long-term investment? This is something you guys dealt with at the Navy every day.
Sure. Just a preliminary comment. How the grid powers innovation is reversible as well. How innovation is revolutionizing the grid. Some of the comments that Steve made. So, show of hands very quickly, and do not raise your hand if you're in PG&E service territory. How many people have ever woken up one morning and didn't have power? Wow, really reliable. So, it gets you really innovative, doesn't it?
Why didn't you want to ask the PG&E people? They would have even less.
So you get really innovative when you don't have power. Like, how am I going to make that cup of coffee? Or how am I going to communicate? How am I going to charge my iPhone or whatever? And that is right at the heart of the grid needs to be safe, reliable, affordable, clean, and increasingly resilient. Think about what's happened in the southern part of the United States with the hurricanes this year. And the way that that grid becomes more resilient is through innovation. Once you have more choices, as Steve pointed out, from that grid, you can really take off on new business models, the adoption of new technology faster. So it's really, really a key point that it works both ways. The other point is that probably the greatest innovation that is happening out there related to the grid is where megabits meet megawatts. The deployment of information technology in the sensing and control system, our ability to grab big data, produce big data, to manipulate it, use machine learning and predictive analytics is just increasing the efficiency, lowering the cost, and increasing the reliability and resilience of the grid.
So are we using data to the extent we can to really power this innovation and this change on the grid? And if not, what else can be done, either in terms of data transparency or data work within the utilities or utility teams to better unlock this sort of data revolution that we see coming?
Well, I'll start. Yeah. I mean, I think, it's interesting because I find that there's generally two types of audiences I talk to. One of the ones, like this one, where we're really thinking about advanced data, we're thinking about how we utilize them. The other is places where we're still debating, should we actually install smart meters? And, candidly, it really starts with capturing data in order to use the data. And the ability to start bringing sensing and monitoring technology onto the grid is critical. Denny, what you mentioned, PG&E, we've got about 25% of our circuits that we've now really brought to a high level of automation, sensing and control, self-healing capabilities. That's saving 1.6 million customer minutes of outage. I mean, it drives real reliability to customers every day. Smart meter data has been phenomenally effective at helping us also know how we should best design our system to how customers are actually using the system every day. You know, historically in the electric sector, you really use some significant engineering assumptions to build out a robust system that you ensure always has the capacity to deliver for customers. With smart meters, you start to get insight into what's actually happening in real time on the system, not what you assumed. And that translation and transition from moving of a world of assumption to world of data and reality offers huge benefits in how the system can run and what you can do with it.
What can we be doing better in that transition or in that use of data? Either Steve or Karen.
I think you know, you've spoken about it from the utility perspective, and there's certainly within the utility model, there are a whole range across your operational space where better use of data will actually save you money. But actually better use of data will actually reduce carbon emissions and allow the consumers to save money too. So you look at some of the really innovative customer service applications that are being developed, and I always give a lot of credit to the rural co-ops for some of the work that they're doing in harvesting the data and allowing that their customers to use the data. And some of the low-income consumer programs that they've instituted, which you know, you may have trouble paying your utility bill, but most people, regardless of their income levels, have a smartphone. And there are programs that allow low-income people to do prepaid bills, but then to monitor their electricity use over the course of a day and a week, and then reduce the shutoffs that the consumers experience because they're actually actively managing their electricity as a result of having access to data that they didn't have before. So I think we have to think about data not just from the engineering perspective, but across the range of ways that we can, the platform that the electricity sector now provides for us.
Yeah, I mean, this gets me thinking about something else too, which I think the data is one piece, but as it comes into an organization, this actually has to do with how organizations are structured and where it goes in and whether we have the right talent and in the right places or stovepipes that can handle data and find these particular areas of value. And so I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about what you're thinking about organizationally and how you've seen that the organization of PG&E has to adapt for the future.
Yeah, and I mean, organization is really critical. And we need to remember that you know, utilities have a really critical objective. If you are an engineer working at PG&E on asset management systems, your job is to make sure those lights always stay on. We really want to make sure we're protecting the system because reliability societally is so critical. As you said, we see what happens when society loses power, and it's something we can't let happen. But we also realized if you want to drive innovation on the system, you need to sort of pull a team out from that existing structure and the challenge of the day-to-day work on running the system. You need to pull out your best and brightest. You need to pull them together in a different structure with a different goal. Their goal is to learn. The goal is to push the boundary of what we can do, to do it in safe ways, to find places to demonstrate it and learn, not just go kind of whole hog and blind into it, but to get the real data, the real facts. We actually created a team we call Grid Integration and Innovation. And we pulled people out of our asset management team, we pulled people out of our energy supply team, we pulled people out of our customer-facing teams, and we put them together with a different objective. Re-envision what the grid could look like and understand what will it take. What kinds of technology have to come together? How do we know it will work? How do we prove it? How do we show it so that the world can see it, so that we can justify changing our core system to actually deliver on that? It's been a phenomenally successful team because they really helped us look differently. They're managing that San Jose pilot I mentioned earlier. And the goal of the San Jose pilot is not just to do a pilot, it's to prove it out so that we can then build it into the base system. And we've got more coming. So I really do think it takes a special team with the right structure, the right people, and the freedom to think differently.
Steve really makes a great, powerful point, and it is all about people after all. If you imagine yourself 50,000 feet looking down on, or out in outer space, looking down on the grid, you would be able to see with the right kind of data, the right kind of analytics, the right kind of machine learning, and ultimately artificial intelligence, where are the pain points? Where are the congestion points? Where are the all too frequent failures? Where is there excess capacity? How can we add efficiency to the grid in delivering all of the innovation services that are necessary for our business, for our quality of life, and indeed, from my background, for our national security?
I think there's one more piece to the organizational issue, which is governance. because this new grid is really it's hard to distinguish, and you talk about looking at it from the top down. It's very hard to distinguish where a distribution system, which is state, and a transmission system, which is federal regulatory, actually ends anymore. And this idea of data moving from the consumer all the way through the utility to regional transmission organization is really blurring the lines between federal and state jurisdiction in a way that is, in some instances, preventing us from really taking full advantage of the opportunities that we have here.
Not sounding too cynical or anything, but in reflecting back on Steve's opening comment, how the grid powers innovation and how regulation disables innovation.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to just add, because I think it's important. You know, regulators, my regulatory friends here in California have a very difficult job. Because you know, not only do we have to try and understand the changes and the structures that are happening, but at the same time, we can't lose sight of the vital role that regulation plays to ensure that the system stays safe and reliable and ensure everyone comes along. Because you know, the fact is, in California today, in PG&E's service territory, 45% of our customers make less than $60,000 a year. We have 1.4 million of our 5 million customers who are eligible for our low-income programs here in California. We cannot claim that we have a sustainable economy in California unless it's affordable for all of them, unless all of us collectively come along together. And you know, the regulators have an important job to make sure that all customers are protected and we all come along together. So I do think we have to speed up the pace of regulation, but we can't do it at the expense of making sure that we bring everyone along on this journey.
I want to drill into this question on people a little bit more. And Denny, you and I have had this discussion quite a bit of how do you actually create incentives so people can take risk that's calculated, but understand and sort of play around with some of these new structures and what's coming up. And I was struck, one of the utilities that we work with asked us recently to set up a bunch of meetings with Google and Nest, but not about their energies, but really just their HR people. How do you actually create incentives for innovation? Right. How do you create environments where people can try new things and take calculated risk in a good way? And I'm curious if we could talk a little bit about that, and I want to also see what are the right incentives we're putting in place for these new teams within utilities that can help people break through the mold.
Pilot programs are fantastic. They need to be at a large enough scale that ultimately, if they work, you can scale it up to the entire system, but they need to be narrow enough so that people are pushing the envelope, if you will, for innovation and doing things differently. But that is a way to accelerate the pace of innovation. You gain confidence as you have experience with a pilot program, whether it's how you interconnect various customers, how you manage demand on the one side, how you can optimize best value, least cost generation on the other side. But pilots are a good way to create that environment in which people can experiment a little bit.
I will say, I think this issue is a really critical one. Traditionally in utility environments, you know, you think about how people are incented. People are incented to make sure we succeed. Remember those folks I talked about? You're not incented to let the lights go out. You're incented to keep them on, stay on budget, you know, meet your targets. And one of the things I talk a lot to our team about is if we're not failing some, we're not succeeding. If we don't see failure, we're not pushing ourselves hard enough. Now, it's our job to make sure we manage failure, that we don't fail for our customers, but that, you know, if we're not going into programs thinking this is going to work and finding out it doesn't, then we're not pushing hard enough to see what's out there. So creating the incentives to fail fast and turn failure into success is a big deal. And frankly, I'm not sure we even have the answers for it yet. I'd like to go talk to some of those folks at Google, too, to figure out how you can help me out on that one. Because I think that HR system of helping people understand that it's the right thing to push. It's the right thing to push beyond what normal success might look like and to learn from that failure. So shifting the success, or shifting the metric and the incentive, not just to get the task done, but what did we learn from that task? And if we learned, then we advanced, we succeeded.
Yeah, it's easier said than done to have the confidence that your leadership will stand up behind you when that
Absolutely.
stuff happens, right? And that those feedback loops are built into the system.
But I also think that, you know, you're dealing with you're a regulated industry. And a lot of the change that's happening in the grid is coming from third-party providers and the innovators, and they are just operating in a different environment than you are. And so providing those regulated entities that have a responsibility and a relationship, and we were talking about the regulatory compact, providing you some space to be able to do some of the things that you might do that can reward a risk. Because in many instances, in many states, the utility is actually prevented from doing some of the things that the third-party providers are jumping into.
It all depends on what you want to do and where you want to do it. Right? Reflecting back on my experience in the Navy, we really encouraged innovation. We didn't encourage failure, but we tolerated it in information technology, command control, communications. We did not encourage any innovation in operating nuclear-powered submarines or nuclear-powered aircraft carriers.
Exactly.
Guys, don't be innovative here. Exactly. We stick to the procedures and the tried and true. So it depends on what business you're in, what function, what mission, and sometimes taking a typical Silicon Valley company, whether it's a startup or well-established company, and trying to apply some of the principles that have made them successful to the grid, it isn't a good match. In some cases it is, but you have to be really discriminating about what are the things that you really can gain a lot quickly from innovation.
Thank you for a reminder there, because just to be clear, we don't encourage our nuclear employees to fail either, nor our asset management teams. You're exactly right.
I want to go back to something you were saying about how utilities can look at other models, and you have some experience specifically in Chattanooga around this, utilities are they're thinking out of the box, and specifically around economic development and powering economic development innovation.
And I think one of the mega trends in the grid are digitization, but also convergence. And we're seeing this convergence happening with electricity in the transportation system. You've heard homes talking about electric vehicles, but also with telecommunications. In fact, in many places that you can't distinguish between telecommunications and the electricity network. And in Chattanooga, they used Recovery Act money, the utility EPB, to install broadband network to all of its consumers and customers. And at one point 20 years ago, Chattanooga was one of the dirtiest, poorest cities in the country. And it's gone through this renaissance where it's always listed as one of the top 10 smallest cities in the country to live in. And that investment in broadband, they wanted to be a 1 gigabyte city. They're now a 10 gigabyte city, has led to this kind of real renaissance in downtown Chattanooga with small clean tech companies. eBay is there. And there's an issue where the example of convergence. And as a result of that investment by the utility, it shows that the grid can really be a platform for economic drivers. And this is one of my big concerns when you see the grid as this platform for incredible growth, is that just outside the footprint of EPB, it's still Chattanooga or Chattanooga outskirts, but there are floral companies that have dial-up internet. And the disparities that we can create as we watch the grid grow and change, I think is something we really have to pay attention to.
You mean there's something beyond dial-up internet?
That's true.
In
Nevada, there are places where you're lucky if you've got dial-up.
So I think that's a really good note to end on, because as we think through what we're doing with the grid and innovation, we have to also keep the big picture in mind. I mean, just yesterday we heard the announcement from our Governor Ige of the great state of Hawaii, joined 13 other governors in Puerto Rico, saying that these states are on track to meet the Paris agreements, and that the states that are part of the U.S. Climate Alliance have actually grown significantly faster, about 2 times faster than the states that are not part of the alliance, while reducing their emissions by 15% as opposed to 10% for the other states. So as we're decoupling some of this economic growth from carbon emissions, I think that's one of the things that we're thinking about from a big picture perspective. I mean, we're not doing innovation for innovation's sake. We're not sort of messing with the grid for that sake. We have some big goals in mind here, and these are all ways that we can help get there by working with people and innovation and really working together collaboratively. So please join me in thanking our panelists and our conversation today. It's a pleasure to work with all of you. Great. Thank you.
Thanks, great job. Sorry, logjam back there. Hello, I'm Heather Clancy. Welcome back. Appreciate all of your attention. I'm glad that this is a packed room. Come on, guys. Yes, come on out. We're going to have a hybrid conversation and presentation about transforming urban deliveries. And joining me this morning are Yasha Franklin Hodge. He is the Chief Information Officer of the City of Boston, probably watching your flights to see if you can get home, right? And, yep, right. And Stefan Knupfer. He is the Senior Partner with McKinsey & Company. He's focused on urban mobility. And Yasha and I are going to sit here and take some notes while Stefan talks about some new analysis and research that they've done on transforming urban deliveries. Stefan, take it away.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you very quickly for 9-10 minutes. I promise I'm going to be very quick. Number two is this is about kind of two reports that we actually published on future of mobility. One about a year ago, how people move around actually literally today for this conference. One that actually how things are moving around. Parcels, products are moving around in city environment. Very quickly, what I would like to talk about, future of mobility is obviously the topic. I want to actually make sure at the end you have about kind of 3-4 things that you take away. Number one, we do believe that future of mobility is actually more like a revolution that is going to come, and it's going to come significantly faster than most people would think. Second, we do believe it's going to happen in cities. That's exactly why we have Yasha here, and obviously we're going to talk about this, what it means for Boston. It's going to happen, obviously, in large global cities first. And on the other side, I believe it's not going to happen in the existing system, because the existing system will not get us there. So the third thing is then we will need, and it will be technology-driven, new technology will enable us to get into this future of mobility. The end state will be significantly better. It will be more fun to live in cities. On the other side, the transformation, the transition is something that we jointly have to figure out. And I run through this rather quickly. So why cities? Why cities are so important? 80% of global GDP is in cities. That's where the money is. That's where people live. The next thing is on the other side, there's also problems because we already have 70% of the global greenhouse gas emissions in cities. So it's actually not very healthy to live in cities. And then the next thing is that over half of the world population are living in cities, and more actually move to cities. So there will be more people will live in cities. Now think about the congestion and think about the pollution that we already have in cities. Now you know more people are going to move into cities. And then the other thing is then when more people move into cities, they do a lot of things, but they also do two things. They move around, interesting enough. And then the second thing is obviously they buy stuff, and they buy more and more stuff through the internet. So there's a forecast that the internet, obviously e-commerce is going to grow by 40%. If this happens, more and more delivery will obviously go to individual peoples and their home. So you're going to have more traffic of more people coming around. So all of this is not really good, and it's actually difficult. Get back kind of what you see today actually in cities. Now, let me just talk about a little bit the existing system, because we are so used to it. We actually used it for pretty much 100 years, and we haven't changed it. Think about a normal car. It's actually a big investment, the second big investment most likely after you actually bought your house, and you park it for pretty much 96% of the time. That's a really bad investment, and honestly, usually in cities, you pay a lot of money to park it. So there's a much better use, obviously, of a car. How can we utilize it better? The next thing is, if you look at the energy, there's a very little portion, and you see this in the middle, kind of this orange piece. That's actually what you really use to move a person. Everything else is waste. Most of this is actually heat that actually goes away. So it's really bad. The next thing is actually, if you look at accidents, 95% of the accidents are driving errors. Out of this, 1/3 is actually drunk driving. Another third is actually that people don't pay attention. That's something a machine would never do. So therefore, very quickly, we'll figure out that autonomous driving is actually safer. And then the next thing is, if you look at roads, about 50% actually of a city space is occupied by parking, by roads, by driveways, all those different things. About 10% of the roads are used to full capacity in peak times. So the solution, very honestly, for traffic jams is not building more roads. Actually, it's figuring out to better use existing roads. And that's what we are talking about. The good thing is there's new technology, a lot of new technology. And all of these technologies are big trends, and they work together in a city very, very fast. Shared mobility, obviously, that means you use an existing vehicle more because you share it. Electrification, obviously, in this electrification, there is no tailpipe emission. Therefore, it's actually, if you keep it outside of the city, that works. Connectivity with your cell phone, with Waze, you always know where the traffic is. Autonomous driving is obviously not only that you're not having a driver in there, it is actually also that an autonomous car can drive faster, can actually drive closer to each other because they brake faster, all those different things. So using road capacity also significantly. And then you add to this the e-commerce, you add to this kind of the same-day delivery. So there are a lot of trends, obviously, that are helpful and that actually used in the right way can make living in the city significantly better. And we're going to have actually, well, less pollution, so it's going to be healthier. We're actually going to be more convenient because you can use intermodals. It's going to be significantly safer, as we talked about it. It's going to be greener, and it's going to be less expensive. So the end state is actually very, very interesting and very good. Now, if you look at this, the question is then, so which cities are going to actually be the first ones? So we looked at more than 2,000 cities globally, and then analyzed this. And we do believe that there are specific city archetypes. So modern cities, Western cities like New York, London, Paris. There might be actually big cities like Mexico City, which might have a different archetype, cities that have to do something, like Shanghai, like Delhi, large cities, growing cities, but obviously they have significant health issues there. There might be suburbs, actually, like the typical North American suburbs there might be. What we're trying to say is it's very important for business and actually also for city leaders to figure out which city is going to be the early adopters, because those actually are the ones that you want to work with. Now, in the new report, what we have done is actually that we look at commercial vehicles because of higher utilization of them, higher fuel consumption, more pollution with their powertrain. So they actually are an even bigger problem, while smaller with the number, but a bigger problem for cities. And that's kind of where the second report focuses on. And what we came up with is actually not necessarily a lot of kind of new ideas, but very honestly, the existing ideas that we actually came up with, and we prioritized, we looked at over 100, we prioritized about 20. 6 of them have the biggest impact and pretty much work in every city. If you take them, urban consolidation center, an existing kind of concept, but with new technology really works, because at one point, as a city, you have to decide, is everybody allowed to drive in the city in and out with an empty truck, for example? Night delivery, a real issue, not actually a new idea, but if you combine it with electrical vehicles, it reduces the noise. If you have autonomous, you don't have to have actually people driving at night. So all of them actually, as a combination, might work significantly better. And as I said, we have 2 reports out there. The one is actually a year old that talks about people moving around. The new one that you will find also here kind of laid out is the one that talks about kind of what we call commercial mobility. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Stefan. I wanted to start with Yasha to, first of all, I would love to know which city you identify with in that model. But also how you've been impacted in Boston by some of the mega trends that Stefan just brought up.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think Boston in that model is kind of in between the second and third. We're a dense European-style city. We're not at the scale of some of the global megacities, but we also don't have the suburban urban feel that many American cities do. So we are being affected by the shifts in urban logistics. I mean, we don't have a lot of hard data on this, and that's one of the challenges that we're facing, but we see it every day on the roads of the city. We see the congestion, we see the conflict that comes, and there are more and more vehicles that are involved in logistics in the city. So, you know, a personal example that I get to see every morning on my bike ride into work, I go down a fairly major street that feeds into downtown, and every single morning at 8:45, there is a tractor trailer parked blocking one of the travel lanes delivering to a donut shop. And the trailer is bigger than the donut shop, but for whatever reason, that is proven to be economically efficient for the company to operate such a large vehicle, despite the fact that it has huge externalized costs in terms of congestion and safety for everyone else around it. So you then magnify that by thousands of times a day in different contexts, and you start to get a sense of the scale of how much this is impacting cities, especially as this continues to grow.
That the stat on there about the parking spots and sort of the space dedicated to the travel infrastructure. Is that about the same? 50%, I think what it said, it was dedicated of the land.
Yeah, that seems about right. I mean, it's you know, we are like many cities. I mean, we don't have the level of surface parking that you see in places like Atlanta, but we have a tremendous amount of on-street parking, and you know, the road network and the urban fabric was rebuilt over decades to be focused around the automobile, and now we're trying to change that.
So you mentioned, I mean, obviously first of all, good on you for your bike riding, but secondly, you mentioned data, right? You don't have the data, so how are you moving towards getting the data? You're the chief information officer, and maybe what kind of data, you know, could you get from the private sector that might help?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think we're starting to see some interesting private sector collaborations with the city, less on the logistics side, but more thinking about data from Uber. We have a data sharing agreement that helps us understand their impact on the road system. We get data from Waze, which gives us a really fine-grained view on congestion and road speeds. We've actually used that for a bunch of experiments that we've run.
I'm sorry, you get the data. They give it to you?
They actually give it to us, yeah. And so we're able to run experiments like, what if we change our enforcement strategy for double parking? Does that improve congestion or not? And so those kinds of things become really valuable tools. You know, there's no central registry of every commercial delivery that's happening in a city, and I don't think we're going to see that anytime soon. But we can start to think about how we tap into new data sources and new analytic tools to help us test out the impact of interventions. And if we do pilot some of the things that Stefan talked about in his proposal of night deliveries or load pooling, things like that, we have some really interesting tools now that can measure whether or not that makes a positive impact on the environment.
Yeah, actually, so we'll go to that. The 6 models: urban consolidation centers, night deliveries, electric vehicles, load pooling, parcel lockers, autonomous ground vehicles. Stefan, which methods are emerging most quickly? Or is it all combination of them?
The combination obviously will be the most powerful one. We do believe that they have different time frames, exactly as you described. To be quite honest, electrical vehicles will come very, very quickly because we talked about them forever. They have been around, first time 1920. But actually over the next few years, I think we have about next 2 years, I believe if I'm correct, globally, about 350 new kind of electrical vehicles worldwide coming into the market. So this is actually never seen before. So therefore, electrical vehicle will happen. That's actually passenger cars. Interesting enough, on the truck side, that's where people have picked us up significantly faster. There was not a lot of discussion, very honestly, about it 12, 18 months ago. And all of a sudden, it peaks, kind of, that everybody talks about electrical trucks. The technology is more or less the same. So therefore, that's actually something that anyway comes. I do believe that the parcel lockers, the autonomous ground vehicles need a little bit more technology. There's actually a little bit more difficulties on the investment side. I do believe, as I said, the urban consolidation center, it just makes sense at one point to think about kind of that not everybody drives into the city, does something, the city drives, parks, whatever he does.
Right.
So you want to have literally in cities a fully loaded kind of truck, car. And then the third thing is the night delivery. Just imagine you would, during the day, you wouldn't have any trucks or vans actually on the roads. Just think about the picture that you have. Nobody parks there. I'm living in New York City at this point. You have the avenues. And literally, you can go slalom between kind of 4 people live. If you do this, you have 4 lanes. It makes a big difference.
Have you, I mean, like, where have you seen some successful tests? And I want to know what you're doing, if you're doing any of them in a moment. But, you know, of those methods, are there?
So I give you just an example. On the night delivery, Barcelona has tested it. And actually, obviously, the right thing to do as a city, you test it very small, little. If it works, then you roll it out rather quickly. And I do believe that Spain actually thinks about kind of rolling it out significantly more. So that's just one little example. So all of those things actually are, from a technology standpoint, pretty much tested. Right. I also believe that the technology will drive it. And then I do believe that city governments and other governments obviously need to kind of adapt and help to find the right environment, obviously, to work together, because it's going to be very interesting, because you have to have the private sector working together with the government to find the right solution.
So Yasha, are you trying any of those things? And if so, what would be the metric for success that would make you want to roll it out more quickly?
Sure, absolutely. So we're in some very early stage planning around some of these things, especially thinking about what tools we could have to incentivize night deliveries and urban consolidation in logistics. I think we echo that idea that the answer is all of the above. There are some things like autonomous ground vehicles that are going to take a while both for the technology to mature, but where we also don't really know how those will interact in the urban environment, especially if they're traveling on sidewalks. So there's some learning ahead of us. I think the big thing for us, though, is to think about incentive alignment, because what we're already seeing is that some of these things are happening not because of government action, but because it makes economic sense. We're already seeing parcel lockers in new buildings becoming a standard feature because it's an amenity that tenants demand, and it lowers cost and complexity for building managers and logistics companies. We're seeing, I think, the adoption of the private sector of some really interesting tools that are machine learning models and real-time analytics platforms for optimizing delivery schedules and routing, because they want to spend less time driving. That's cost for them. So the challenge for us as a city is going to be to say, where can we regulate? And we are often limited. I mean, we don't have the ability to say all deliveries must be at night. But if we can create an incentive for a business to do a pilot project and then start to use data from some of these new sources we have to measure congestion impacts, to measure emissions, hopefully in partnership with the logistics companies that are operating the deliveries, then we can start to create a framework for saying, hey, this is, it's good economics, it's good for the city as a whole, for the public good, and it's helping us collectively meet some very important sustainability goals.
What's going to tell Barcelona that that's successful? Like, what is it that they're studying specifically?
So they study more or less kind of how it literally works. So a real life example. So you bring in obviously electrical vehicles for noise reduction. You have equipment that is actually noise reduced. You need to figure out kind of how somebody at night can deliver. So what is actually, who is the recipient, all those different things. And you have to figure out the economics. For me, the interesting part, I think, on this entire thing is that the discussion, if this is going to happen, is more or less through. So people say it's in the money. The second thing is people say it's going to happen. So people only talk about kind of how it's going to happen. So, and I talk to automotive manufacturers, I talk to automotive suppliers, I talk to cities, I talk to infrastructure providers, and I thought I would get actually some pushback on all those messages. I didn't get any pushback for the last year on any of those topics. So the question is only how do we go about it? Interesting enough, we also work together with C40, my team and I right now, which obviously the future of mobility is going to play a significant role, and also you see kind of the same reaction there.
Yeah. So it takes probably digital investment, though. So, like, what do you have to do to make your infrastructure, your digital infrastructure, ready for that?
Sure. I mean, it takes technology investment by all parties. Cities need to have better data about how their roads are being used. They need to be able to consume data coming from the private sector, and private sector companies need to invest in their tooling and their systems. And while I share Stefan's optimism that this is going to happen, the cautious note that I'd sound is that the change is hard, and especially when you're in a governmental or regulatory environment where there's a political dimension to it. You can sit on any street corner in downtown Boston and watch how the curb is used. And what you will see more often than not is that you have 3 or 4 parked cars, and over the course of an hour or two, there's going to be probably 15 short-term uses of road space where an Uber picks up or drops off a passenger, a UPS truck parks and makes a delivery. But we've still decided to allocate most of that curb space to the long-term storage of people's private vehicles, which is not really necessarily the most ideal model for it. But at the same time, there's a constituency for that. And so having that conversation with the local business to say, hey, maybe we should take away this parking spot, that's a difficult and time-consuming conversation to have. So I think that's really one of the biggest roles of government, is to be that facilitator of these discussions about how to make change and how to shift the way we've allocated the limited resources we have to have better outcomes for all.
With that, we need to hit the road. So I'm going to thank Stefan and Yasha. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I have to. And it is my pleasure to introduce Boris von Bormann. He is the CEO of Mercedes-Benz Energy for the Americas. And he's going to talk to us about how automakers are driving the future of net zero building. Boris, welcome.
Hi,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Got to dodge the table.
I'll try. Good morning, everyone. You're still awake? I know we have lunch coming up. First of all, I want to thank all the organizers, all the people that work so diligently behind the stage and in front of the stage to putting on such a great conference here, and thank you for inviting me to speak. Again, my name is Boris von Bormann, CEO for Mercedes-Benz Energy. You might have heard about the Mercedes-Benz part, not the energy part, so I'm going to take you a little journey for 10 minutes on how Mercedes-Benz Energy sees the future of electric transportation, of energy, and how we develop this whole ecosystem. So you see a great quote here from our chairman, Dr. Zetsche. We just launched last week at the International Auto Show in Frankfurt a lineup of electric vehicles to the year 2022. You see there the GLA on stage and the Project One on stage, two cars that couldn't be more different. One is a full electric, normal GLA small class vehicle that you can use for urban or mid-sized travel that's going to be on the market in 2022. The car next to it, it's the Project One. It's around $3 million, 275 limited capacity of what we make, so 275 cars that we're going to make on this. Also, just a 1.6-liter engine and Formula One technology on electric drive, so it has a full battery. It has a range of 25 kilometers, full electric. So a little bit different, but it has around 1,000 horsepower. So if you're interested, let me know. But unfortunately, all sold out. Daimler, as we all know, and I promised Dennis McGinn to bring in the quote. There's one more quote that Dr. Zetsche, our chairman, did. It said, the electric transportation or electric vehicles are similar to a ketchup bottle. Now you're wondering, well, how does that compare, you know? So what he says is, well, with a ketchup bottle, you know it's coming, but you don't know when and by how much. And it's kind of like the electric vehicles in the market, unfortunately, at the moment. So we, as a car maker, are very much challenged in how to predict that market and how to prepare for that market. We obviously are putting a lot of focus on it. We heard the 1% proliferation of electric vehicles in the market at the moment, or total install base. However, I think now that all the major car makers are pushing into that market as strongly as we are at Daimler and others are going in there as well, we're going to see a big change in that. How do we change to that total ecosystem that's necessary to bring electric transportation to it? At Daimler, we have a vision on it, and you see it on the screen right now, which we label CASE. CASE stands for connected, autonomous, shared, and electric. So with these four acronyms, we really cover the whole range of what we see, what's necessary to really make that transformation from a full combustion engine car automobile maker to a mobility as a service company, where we see our future and what we believe is necessary to sustain the success that we have in the market and also to offer the product that people are interested in the future. Connected, you're looking at very different things. You're looking at connected cars, you're looking at connecting people, you're looking at communities. As you might know, we own 100% a shared ride service called Car2Go, which we've also launched in the US and San Diego as a test project over several years, a couple of years ago. We have that fully deployed in Germany. Autonomous vehicles we're looking at, so self-driving cars. We've been on the forefront with our S-Class there and in many other areas. We just also last week launched or showcased the concept car of a smart vehicle that can actually follow another vehicle autonomously, so that way you can transport luggage if you need more than 2 or 3 people in the car with luggage traveling to a destination. You have 2 cars that are actually following autonomous behind each other. Shared services, obviously in the market. We're all familiar with some of the companies that are in this area here and strong in shared services. And then electric. So for electric, for us, there's many different areas that touch on electric. Obviously, we're looking at the electric car. And back here, you see our first launch that we showed in April 2016, which is actually going to hit the market in 2018, end of 2018, which is our GLC, based electric vehicle, so it's called the EQC. It's a full-range electric vehicle. We currently plan to have 10 plug-in vehicles on the market by 2018, and we're going to have about 10 full electric vehicles on the market by 2022. This vehicle right here has a range of 500 kilometers. So when I look into the audience here, and I know I'm in San Jose and in California, how many people of you own an electric vehicle by show of hands? So there's quite a few out there. Could be a lot more. I expected more in this audience. We got to work on this here. Of those people that just showed their hands, how many also own their own charger at home and also their own solar system on the roof, if I can see that? All right, so there's quite a few out there. So what we really see is, and you're wondering, how does a car maker connect into the home? And this is also what Mercedes-Benz Energy does, is we connect the various pieces within an ecosystem that's necessary to drive the electrification of transportation in our minds. So you start with an EV. Obviously, the next question is, how do you charge it? You need a wall box at home, most likely, to make it more convenient, or obviously there's charging infrastructure, public charging infrastructure that you can attach to if you do not have your own home or are renting or an apartment. Next areas that we can play with is obviously, in some areas, the deregulated energy markets. I know gentlemen from PG&E might not hear that as well, but in Germany we have, for example, a completely deregulated retail energy market. We can launch our own energy tariffs that will bring down the cost of an electric vehicle that people obviously are looking for. Then energy management, and we all want to connect to what we're doing with our phones, right? So if it's your sprinkler system at home or your vehicle, obviously you're charging your energy, your smart home system, it's very important that we have that and that we can connect into those. As the next steps, obviously, we want to bring in together a community that works on that, share information. That's the shared service that I mentioned before. We're looking at energy efficiency in the home, bringing in smart home, and that's when we bring in solar and energy storage. We just launched at Mercedes-Benz our own storage system last year in Germany on a global scale, and we also launched in the United States our own storage system based on batteries that are made in the vehicles. One interesting aspect that you can look there also at is that with the increase of electric vehicles in the market, we see that by 2022, 23, it is predicted that 1 out of 4 vehicles is going to be electric. You're going to have a lot of batteries that are in vehicles that are driving around in the market. If I look at the battery market at the moment and all the figures that we've seen, I see that just Daimler alone, so the company that I work for, in 2024 puts out as much capacity, about 3 times as much capacity as the total global energy storage market, stationary storage market. So and that's just Daimler alone. So if you look at all the other companies that are out there, you know, there's many, many electric vehicle companies out there. You're going to have a really strong capacity in the market, and you're going to have a flood of batteries. So what do we do with those batteries? We have the vision of obviously putting these and putting them in second use and putting these in energy storage at a home, at a business, or in large-scale utility applications to support the grid and also buildings. So when you see, and you saw that by a show of hands here, people that are interested in an electric vehicle are really more keen in terms of their mindset to open up their home and also to other measures. You suddenly become more aware of your energy usage. You're going to become more aware of how the system at home works. You want more transparency. And I think, therefore, as an automaker, we have a great chance to push this into the home. So myself, personally, when I bought my first EV, and I have to admit it wasn't a Mercedes-Benz, about 3.5 years ago, I looked at a home charger. So I put in a home charger, and I said, hey, that would be really great if I could just drive my car with solar energy, right? So I had a home energy system installed. And then I thought, well, and as a gentleman from PG&E mentioned earlier, right now it doesn't really make sense to put a battery unless you really, really want it. However, I really wanted it, and I wanted to drive green. So I wanted to use my own energy into my car and make sure that whatever I do, I drive completely with my own solar energy and put that into on the road. So I installed my own battery, had solar on the roof. But right now, that's something that people are doing on their own. You have to be more electrical engineer, and I'm not, so it's very difficult to put that in. So that's what our vision is at Mercedes-Benz. So in the future, we want to take care of this whole ecosystem from A to Z. We want to make sure that the customer experience is seamless, it's easy, and we're going to be able to drive you not only with the vehicle, but also provide mobility services, shared services, and provide a total ecosystem for electric transportation, and to push that envelope further into the home so that you can be completely energy neutral or carbon neutral on your way to electric transportation. And with that, I'm out of time. Thank you very much for your attention.
I'm going to talk about some personal experiences at the heart of the conversation today that I had while I was working in China for over 7 years for the IBM company. But first, I wanted to kind of go to the title of my presentation for a second with the idea of human plus machine helping with something. It's kind of funny in today's world with AI and cognitive computing growing and grabbing a lot of press attention. When you say those two things together, you'll get excitement or you'll get anxiety, a lot of different reactions, whether it's with companies or whether it's individuals. Yet it's not a very new idea. The idea of combining human innovation, creativity, building, along with the benefits of creating a machine that can help those things, the problem that's trying to be solved, be more efficient, can be automated, have risk taken out of it, has been around for a very long time. In fact, it drove the Industrial Revolution. It's been driving the information technology revolution and has actually underpinned urbanization, globalization, and the growth that we've seen in the last 30, 40 years now in those areas at extreme pace. So it brings great benefit with it, but it also can bring challenges. And one of the challenges is keeping balance while you're going through the development itself, and balance between social needs, economic needs, individual needs, the citizen themselves, and the environment. And if you're going so fast that balance spins out of control in one area, or you put your foot on the accelerator too hard in an area, you can have unwanted or unintended consequences. This is the Forbidden City circa 2014, and this is my wife and I on that same day where we had migrated ourselves to designer masks by this point. We've been in China for about 5 years. And you look at the picture and say, economic development, industrialization, you look at all of those things, it sits behind what you see in the air, but it's not that new actually. If you were in LA in the late 60s, all the way back to the early 50s, you would have seen scenes very similar to this. If you were in London in the 1950s and experienced the great smog in the 1950s in London, you would have seen things like that. So it's not a new circumstance completely that you see these kind of impacts on environment when you have economic development, industrialization, those type of things going on. So the real question is what to do differently, how to change this cycle. And actually, even microcycles exist underneath this in cities as they urbanize, even in the industrialized Western world. As more transport arrives in, more people arrives in, air quality can actually start coming down, CO2 emissions can start coming up, unless you can keep everything in balance as you go through that economic development cycle. So how do you address that? Well, the neat part is that there's a lot of possibilities, many, many possibilities today of levers that you have actually to get insight to the systems problem that sits underneath this, things getting out of balance and not being able to have the right kind of insights to the needs of the economy, the government officials that are responsible for that economy actually, to the citizens' needs, and to be able to look at all of those systems and the needs and the opportunities associated with them and find balance. And how do you get the balance is by sharing information, by sharing insights, building trust between those systems based on information, and then taking that information and getting deeper insights of how those interactions between those systems and those parts of the economy, when working together collaboratively, can actually produce different kinds of outcomes. Because at the end of the day, what people want and what drives change are people's wants, ultimately, their needs, their desires, what society would like to do, the best visions of themselves, is clean, safe communities that they can live in. And they want to develop those quickly, rapidly, and want to live in things that they've dreamed of during their lives. It's really these desires that people have and the society has is actually driving the whole green revolution. When you look at what's going on actually in the change in the utility industry and the transformation there that's going, that's driven by society saying we now have the possibility of doing something differently, something that fits the way we want to use energy and produce the outcomes for the planet, for my family, for my health, all the things associated with that I desire, and that independence is now arising. It was those desires that started our research team in China to look at what could we do working with the Chinese government to help them make better decision on a day-to-day basis of the levers they could pull to actually change the way things looked in China, in the cities and in the communities on a day-to-day basis. If you're sitting in the control room of a Chinese government building in Beijing or in Shanghai, you can change traffic patterns, you can shut down industry around you, you can look at the type of vehicles you have on the road, many different things pull, but they all have outcomes and impacts based on what you're doing, and you're being graded on it, and actually all governments are being graded on how they make those decisions every day. By using artificial intelligence, cognitive technologies, IoT, many of the buzzwords you hear every day now, we've actually been able to give much deeper insights of what levers to use at what time to change outcomes on a day-to-day basis by looking further ahead and forecasting what the problem would be so you can make better decisions earlier to change the way the air quality would be or what people are doing that affect the air quality, whether economically or personally. And the net effect of that is actually to produce more days like this, more beautiful days for people to enjoy in Beijing in this case, and looking at another picture of the Forbidden City, which is actually a gorgeous city and a phenomenal place, but when it's covered and you can't see it, obviously it doesn't have the same kind of personal impact you'd like to have for it, or doesn't show your community in the way you'd like your community to be seen. I started the conversation with a bit of a dialogue on people, and people are at the forefront of the innovation and will drive the change that's actually needed in solutions, and I want to let our Chinese research team talk to you for just a moment to get a better idea of the work they've done.
我是绿色地平线计划的一名研究人员，也是一个5岁孩子的妈妈。很多人关注雾霾，是因为孩子，他们是空气污染最小也是最无助的受害者。孩子在旅行或者在北京看到难得一见的蓝天白云时，都会很兴奋，而这些在我们小时候都是司空见惯了。 现在成了奢侈品。我和我的同事意识到，绿色地平线计划是我们要带着使命感去做的事情。
近年来，越来越多的人们开始关注空气污染，关注环境保护，因为这和我们每一个人的生活都息息相关。公众的参与度越来越高。 一方面，大家通过空气质量的情况，更好地规划自己的户外活动，降低空气污染对健康的危害；另一方面，大家从自身做起，用不同的方式参与到各种环保行动中，为改善我们的生活环境而贡献力量。
绿色地平线计划启动1年多来，我们一直在为中国的可持续发展做出努力。 现在，我们已经在空气质量管理、新能源高效利用以及工业企业的节能减排等领域都取得了一些初步的成果。
One of our most pioneering work is the air quality management system, which enable government officials to predict, identify, and track sources of pollution in a particular region. It works by collecting varied data from different sources, including environmental data, weather monitoring stations, satellites, terrain maps, even social media, economy, and public health data. The idea is to use combined power of big data analytics, Internet of Things, and cognitive computing to gather and analyze huge amounts of data about our environmental ecosystem. We assimilate all those data and use cognitive technologies to analyze and understand the current air quality condition and their impacts. The system allows us to predict air quality levels and patterns, not only for today, but for next 7 to 10 days.
我们现在在中国的工作，可以帮助下一代从口罩中解脱出来，保持我们和自然和谐的关系。但是我们不会就此停止。环境污染和气候变化是全球面临的普遍问题。我们在中国所做的工作，也可以帮助其他国家拥有自己的绿色地平线。For our children.
For our environment.
For our happiness.
For our planet.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. This is Brad Gammons, Global Managing Director of IBM Energy and Utilities. Thank you, Brad. We are going to go right into another panel, and it is about something that we haven't talked about enough. It's come up in a number of sessions, but not as explicitly as I think we're going to be talking about more and more. Policy matters. And what's the role, what's the opportunity, what's the responsibility of this audience and our extended audience to be looking at these? What are some of the issues? How does it work? How can we be effective? And to lead that conversation, one of the great advocates on business and sustainability in the policy arena, the chair and co-founder of E2, Environmental Entrepreneurs. Please welcome Nicole Lederer.
Thank you. Well, good morning. As Joel said, I'm co-founder of Environmental Entrepreneurs. We're a policy platform for business leaders to advocate for strong environmental policy, to grow the economy and create jobs. And I'm really delighted to have 3 colleagues on this stage with me today who are both policy and clean economy experts. Congressman Jared Huffman represents California's 2nd district, spanning all the way from the Golden Gate Bridge to the Oregon border and encompassing 6 counties in between. He serves on the Committee on Natural Resources and the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, and he's been an aggressive leader on climate and clean energy policies, both in Congress and prior to that in the California State Assembly. Next to him is John Powers, chairman and co-founder of Clean Capital, which is a financial technology company that makes it easier to invest in clean energy. After serving in the U.S. Army in Iraq, he revamped the U.S. Army's energy program at the Pentagon and was then appointed by President Obama as the Federal Chief Sustainability Officer. Michael Terrell leads energy market development at Google, where he has helped Google procure renewable power to achieve the company's 100% renewable energy target. Prior to joining Google, Michael worked as an attorney and has served in a variety of roles in federal government, including in the White House, where he helped guide U.S. policy on energy and environment. So there is just a huge amount of overlapping private sector and policy experience here on this panel. And I think I'd like to start by observing that I am hearing, and I assume you are hearing, a question a lot lately that goes something like this, and this was posed in a recent Verge article as well. What should clean tech business leaders do to compensate for the lack of leadership from policy leaders in Washington? This panel is going to reframe that question entirely to what can every business leader in this room do to educate, encourage, and ultimately to compel government to do its job. So we all know, at least if you don't know, you need to know that public policy is the substrate in which all of us are doing business, but especially companies in an emerging sector like the clean economy. Policy determines your access to financing, it defines your markets, and it also determines whether you're competing on a level playing field. So whether you're in the clean energy space or water management or building efficiency or transportation or food technology or any of the topics that are being covered at this conference, all of those are highly policy-affected arenas. But fortunately, this room collectively represents enormous advocacy power and leverage if you come to the table. So with that, I'd like to start with Jared. You've been on both sides of that table, both as an advocate and as a legislator. From your perspective in Congress, and given the issues that you work on, does it matter to you if clean tech leaders get engaged on policy advocacy, and what happens if they don't?
Right. Well, first, good morning. It's great to be with you. Thanks for all the leadership and innovation in this room, and thanks for including me. It does matter to me that clean tech is at the table back in Washington. I hope you won't give up on Washington, even though right now environmental protection and clean technology and climate leadership are not exactly in favor in the current administration or the current Congress. Whether you are engaged or not, what you need to know is that other people are, and they're going to make decisions that will affect you. So I think it's a good idea to be in the room. And we could talk about all sorts of examples of why that matters. Maybe these critical incentives that we have for wind energy are the best example, because they have been allowed to expire. They've been put into annual extensions that were highly uncertain at various times over the last decade or so. And you can really chart the progress of the wind industry by how good a job Congress and the administration did at providing that long-term signal of support for these incentives. Now, thankfully, we've got it on a pretty good trajectory now for a longer-term phase-out. That's provided enough certainty and enough incentive that the wind energy is going gangbusters right now. But there were moments in the last decade when it almost ground to a halt, and tens of thousands of jobs were lost. So that's just one of many examples you could cite where really important policy decisions hang in the balance back in Washington. And if you're at the table, I think it's going to make a positive difference.
Well, Michael, you are the Chief Energy Procurement Officer for a company that has the market power of a country. Your decisions have a huge impact on a whole ecosystem of energy-related companies and a big impact on local economies. But the decisions you make about where to locate facilities and how to get the renewable energy that you require are significantly influenced by state and federal policies. So at what point and at what level of government does Google engage in policy advocacy, and how do you measure outcomes?
First, also thanks again for having me. It's a great audience here. I should say that when it comes to clean energy from a business perspective, it's full steam ahead. And that's because clean energy makes so much sense for business, for growth, for the economy. There was a gathering here in this room on Monday of corporate renewable energy buyers, and the room was absolutely packed, which is very exciting. So that's a message that I am more than happy to take to any policymaker in any jurisdiction, whether it's at the national level, the regional level, or the local level. And it does take engagement at all of those levels to really affect change. In terms of how do you measure change in progress, you measure that through the uptake of policies that help to promote clean energy and a better climate. And I actually find that I enjoy going into the toughest places to try to change hearts and minds and really make the business case, because all of us here have an incredible case to make. And so at Google, that means going into markets like North Carolina, where we worked with other tech companies and other buyers to create a first-of-its-kind renewable purchase program. The state of Georgia, where we just this summer had a new purchase program approved. And these are markets that weren't traditionally friendly to clean energy. We've done the same in markets like Taiwan, and are also working in Europe to push forward really strong renewable energy policies there. Let's hope this translates into DC. There's been a little bit of a change there, but like I said, I think if you look at the strength and the interest and the growth of this space, the future actually is very positive, and I think we will see positive change to continue.
Well, there's a big company perspective. I'd like to turn to John. Clean Capital operates at the intersection of clean energy and finance and is impacted by both regulation and legislation in both of those arenas. So how do those policies affect your ability to grow your company, and how do you represent Clean Capital's best interests given the limited resources of a small company starting up?
Absolutely. So with Clean Capital, we're financing clean energy projects around the country. Policy touches everything that we do across the board, whether it be local net metering policy, whether it be SRECs in New Jersey, or whether it be SEC policy around the way we handle the funds. Let me ask a question just for the audience. Raise your hand if your firm or company has a government affairs shop. Yeah, some do, most don't. Right? Most don't have a leader like Michael who's going in and understanding that there are literally 50 different policy fiefdoms that you've got to manage within the work you're doing. But it touches, as I said, policy touches everything you do, and if you don't understand it and you don't at least try to follow it, it's going to significantly affect your market. Whether you're buying a project in a place, not to hit on Nevada, but when Nevada cut their net metering, which now may be coming back, and there's this constant back and forth, if you're not paying attention to that, you could really be spending some significant dollars in the wrong direction. It could significantly cost your company. So you've got to understand it, you've got to map it, but you don't need to have, I mean, if you're Google, you can have an amazing policy shop. We have 8 people on our team. I have probably the most policy background, but there are a lot of resources that you can tap into that you don't have to put the effort forward to do all the homework, right? Whether it be E2 or in solar, the Solar Energy Industry Association, or if you're in wind, AWEA, they are doing the homework for you. You just have to make the effort to pay attention. And when you can pay attention, whether it be occasionally, joining a webinar and understanding what's going on with a recent solar trade case, for instance, or reading a policy paper on X, you can understand where the market's going. And from a business perspective, it's critical because it helps us have a leg up on where we want to go next. What's also really important, though, is having your voice at the table. As the congressman said, there's a famous Washington phrase that if you're not at the table, you're on the floor, right? Meaning if you're not at the table as part of the conversation, your programs are getting cut and thrown out the door, right? And why does the business voice matter? Because having been on the flip side of this, I was President Obama's chief sustainability officer for the federal government and sat on the other side of the table when Nicole would bring in business leaders from around the country. You see a lot of the faces over and over again in the government affairs world, and whether it be an outside lobbying shop or, you never know what issue they're bringing to the table. But when someone comes to you and said, look, I own X factory in Iowa, and this is what we're doing, and this is why what you're doing affects me, as a policymaker, that's incredibly powerful. And it's not that difficult to do. You don't have to be a policy expert to do it. I'd argue most of the policy experts on the other side of the table you'll meet with don't know what they're doing anyways. So when you meet with them and you can educate, not to rip on policymakers, but when you can educate them, they get their information from reading think tank papers, high level, often geopolitical documents. If you can give them the ground truth of how it's going to affect you, that significantly impacts things for them and can really change the way they're going to pursue. And organizations like E2 can help provide you the talking points. They can train you on how to communicate. You just have to put that extra effort forward to be part of the dialogue.
Thanks. Well, let's talk about one policy in particular that may have a big impact on this community, and that is the potential infrastructure bill. Now, Jared, you're on the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee. What kind of opportunities does that bill offer this audience, and how should they engage?
That's a great question. I think we're all trying to figure out how serious the opportunity to do something really big in the maybe multi-trillion-dollar level on infrastructure really is. It should have been a day one priority for the Trump administration, but it really wasn't. And there should be a lot of action going forward in the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee in which I serve. I'm sorry to tell you that it's really not. bandwidth of this Congress and this administration seems to be totally consumed with these constant runs at repealing and replacing the Affordable Care Act. We thought we were done with that and maybe could move on to possible tax reform, possible infrastructure, but we're back at it again because of what's going on in the US Senate. So I don't know how many more cycles of healthcare fights we're going to have. Every time we have one, it reduces the chances of us doing something serious on infrastructure. Now, even if we put infrastructure on the agenda, you know, there's a lot of politics involved here. And it's not clear, because we've gotten so many mixed signals from the Trump administration, whether they want to do a good old-fashioned public infrastructure package, which could be enormously popular, which could drive a lot of really much needed investments, could be great for the economy, or whether they want to play around with the tax code and subsidize private types of infrastructure, basically cherry pick the infrastructure in our country that can be monetized and throw incentives at it. That's not really what our country needs, in my opinion. And if that's all there is at the end of the day, I don't think we're going to get much.
Well, that leads into a broader question that I'd like to pose to all of you, and starting with Michael. Michael, you've said that there is an underlying problem here, and that is that the clean tech community's message was buried in the last election. So why did the promise of a 21st century clean economy and all the jobs that go with it, and by the way, E2 research shows that there are currently 3 million clean energy jobs in the US today, they're extremely geographically distributed and they're growing faster than any other sector. So why is this message about this powerful emerging economic sector getting overshadowed? And how do we turn that around? And Michael first, but I'd like to hear from all of you on that.
Yeah, I think that was a learning from last fall, which is that this message was clearly not breaking through everywhere. And I think I would leave folks here with 3 points. One, again, to emphasize that clean energy and the clean economy is good for growth and jobs in the future. It's a $300 billion global market. There's 3 times as many wind and solar jobs as there are coal jobs. And if you just look at our own energy investments that we've made at Google, that's contributed to $3.5 billion of new capital deployment around the world. Second, this is everywhere now, which is something that it really wasn't a few years ago. It's not just limited to California or big cities. There was a great article in the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago profiling Fowler, Indiana, which has really been booming because of the wind business that's come there that's associated with the establishment of new wind farms. And they have tens of millions of dollars flowing into the local tax base, $33 million in new roads, and hundreds of new jobs associated with wind. So it really is everywhere now. And if it isn't, it should be, because it makes so much sense. And I think lastly, we need to open the tent and we need to get more players involved in the space. Back to my point about Monday's conference on clean energy buyers, there are about 50 companies globally who are doing these large renewable energy power purchase agreements like we're doing at Google. 50. There needs to be 50,000. And we need to be looking at policies that open up the platform for more people to get involved and be part of the space. They may not necessarily be what we traditionally thought of as clean energy policies, whether it's a mandate or subsidy. It could just be creating more competitive markets, because the great thing about this space now is that it really can compete, and so give it the opportunity to do that. And I think if we do those 3 things, you really will see the level of interest grow tremendously.
The jobs drumbeat just needs to be hit over and over again. I'm part of a group called New Energy America, which just recently launched. It put out a report yesterday about clean energy jobs in rural America. And echoing what Michael said, 3-to-1 clean energy jobs to traditional fossil fuel jobs. But in 41 states now, clean energy jobs are trumping fossil fuel jobs. I think that's an incredible message in places where it is both red and blue. The other thing I'd say, because of the election, and this may be a real benefit to the industry, which is hurts me in my stomach to say this, but separating out the climate change conversation from the clean energy economy conversation now can sort of happen. When President Trump announced pulling out of Paris, which for many in the room is probably against a lot of our values and a very frustrating thing to see. The response from corporate America was overwhelming on the other side to say, we're still in, right? We're still in because of all these other benefits that it does for us, not just from an environmental perspective, but from a bottom line perspective, from a jobs and a health perspective. Ceres put out a great series of letters signed by Google and many others, including Clean Capital, but literally hundreds of companies that came out and said, we're still in. And it's that clean energy economy that's going to keep driving forward. Now, the state, going back to the reason you need to get involved is because that's going to happen right now at a state-by-state level. And you've got to be paying attention to how you can play and be involved in those states and opening up new markets so you have the opportunity to compete and I think be part of those projects.
Last word, Jared.
Well, I agree. I've been heartened by the response from corporate America as well after President Trump's decision on Paris. But I'm, as a policymaker, I can't stop looking at this through the paradigm of climate change, especially with so many parts of the United States underwater and devastated, and Puerto Rico today. And, I guess it's possible that these extreme weather events that we've been living through could bring us back around to a leadership posture on global climate policy. I hope we can get that done. But in the meantime, I think all that leadership we're seeing at the state level, at the local government level, at the non-governmental and the business level is more important than ever. And it's great to see this event and other aspects of that leadership rolling forward strong.
And I'm not saying the leadership it's incredibly important, but the fact that we're not going to see it within at least the next 4 years out of the administration.
Hey, we got an election in 2018.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
well,
don't forget.
Yeah, but not for the White House, right? But can we keep pushing the clean energy economy forward without that leadership going forward and get the same results, right? And
you have to. We have to.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Well, I'd like to hand off to our sidebar here and see if there are any audience questions that they have for us.
Yeah, it's interesting because you guys are answering in a way that's really multifaceted as reflected of your perspectives. And at the same time, a lot of our audience is sort of thinking, okay, well, how useful, what kind of impact are we actually going to make given that all these major companies are still in? Does it really make a difference from a federal government administration? A lot of the companies in here don't have government affairs offices. They can leverage E2 and others, but does it actually make a difference at this point with these 4 years under Trump?
I'm certainly going to argue that it does. In fact, I think it's essential that your voice be part of this process. Look, the Trump administration is loaded up with fossil fuel interests. They're making decisions across the spectrum of public policy that are either going to be acceptable to you or could be really, really detrimental to you. So the idea that you would not be fully engaged right now, I think, is just not strategically sound. And of course, from my perspective, I want to see good public policy outcomes. Our best hope of fighting back some of these dirty fossil energy priorities is by having the clean energy world and the future at the table. So we do need you.
And we don't live in a dictatorship, right? So whatever he wants to get done, by taking your message to members of Congress, for instance, right, as the DOE budget starts to come around, and go talk about R&D on things like ARPA-E, which is an incredibly powerful tool to help drive the area that we're all focused on. Members of Congress, they really manage and own that budget, which is all critical to what we do. So taking that message, helping to explain what's going on to them, and even people within the DOE realm, for instance, or EPA, under Administrator Pruitt is a really challenging place to be right now for bureaucrats. But taking your message in and arguing the case to them is critically important. We saw this with the grid report that Secretary Perry was doing, and there was a significant pushback on that effort. And what many thought was going to be basically a handoff to Big Coal got handcuffed because so many folks went in and argued the fact that, wait a minute, renewables are not crushing the grid. It's the best thing that distributed generation is the best thing to happen to the grid. Well, in 50 years, it only started 70 years ago. So, those arguments are critically important today more than ever.
Well, and they cover the tax policies that are being debated right now. Tax reform is probably more seriously on the table now than it has been in a long, long time. And that means some of these special incentives we provide for the fossil fuel industry, but not for clean energy, are under consideration. It means some of the lifeline policies we have for clean energy could be in the crosshairs. So, I mean, whether it's energy policy per se, or tax policy, or things happening at the EPA, you know, all of it really should matter.
Yeah, just to add to that, I would say don't assume the outcome. Our voice is more powerful than it's ever been, and it's up to us to use it.
I'd just like to thank you all and close by saying the following things. Do not step away from policy now because it looks daunting in Washington or at the state level, because you all have a lot more sway than you think, than most of you know that you do. The important thing is to know how to represent your company to a lawmaker. Know the economic impact, both direct and indirect, that you have on your community, your state, and your country. Know the number of jobs you create, directly and indirectly, and where those jobs are, including your supply chain. Be able to articulate the additional benefits your company provides, including reduced demand for scarce resources, reduced cost to consumers, predictable supply and price of energy and other resources, public health benefits, improved national security, and export opportunities. Those are all the terms in which you should be thinking about your own business when you come to the policy table. And I hope that you'll join us for our breakout session at 1:30 where we'll discuss more specific policies and maybe even do some advocacy training and modeling. So with that, thank you very much to the panelists.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Oakland's Mayor Libby Schaaf, and while you are enjoying the Verge conference in Santa Clara this year, I want to get you excited about coming to Oakland for Verge 2018. Verge is the leading event for the clean economy, drawing experts from all over the world. And that is why Oakland is the perfect place to host Verge 2018. Oakland has exciting organizations, a diverse economy, and is a hub of innovation where urban mobility, smart infrastructure, equity, tequity, and resilience all are highlighted in a fabulous, vibrant city. As the mayor of Oakland, you have my full commitment to make sure that Verge 2018 is the biggest and best Verge ever, with the best speakers, great presentations, innovative attractions, and that local Oakland flavor that has everybody talking. So mark your calendars. I will see you in Oakland in 2018 from October 15th to October 18th. See you there.
I can't tell you how proud we are to bring Verge to Oakland. It's our hometown. My co-founder Pete May and I, native Oaklanders, most of our staff, a good portion of them live in, certainly around Oakland. It's a really, really exciting time to be in Oakland. And you step outside, you will be in the middle of the Oakland Convention Center, right next to the BART station. You'll be in this wonderland of cultures, of restaurants, and just great, great energy. So October 16th, 15th to 18th next year, please save the date, and we look forward to seeing you there. A quick shout out to UPS. As a gift to Verge attendees, if you want to go over to the booth, which is right over here by the elevator, to the UPS store, you can ship your things carbon-free. It's just a gift they're giving if you just need your Verge badge to make that happen. Not for exhibitors, and residents of Maine and Indiana need not apply. No, I just made that last part up. So that will be, please take advantage of that too. Just want to say a few thoughts before I bring Lisa Jackson out to help close out the plenary. One of the things I noticed this year is, this event started off as, technology meets sustainability, and how the convergence of technologies is accelerating sustainability solutions. And that's where we began 6, 7 years ago, and that's still a dominant theme here. But I heard something else this year that really is exciting and really heartening to me, which is about sustainability meeting technology. Not just in the environmental sense, but particularly in the equity and inclusion piece. How do we keep remembering that for all of this incredible technology here now and soon to come, that this is about people. This is about us. This is about our bodies, our families, our kids, our futures, our communities. And that needs to be at the front and center of this conversation just as much as the Internet of whatever, and the electrification of whatever, and the amazing buildings and circular economy and cities and circularity and all of that we have been talking about for the past 4 days. So I really like the fact that we've come to this place where Verge is really about head and heart. And I encourage this community that's grown, this amazing community of all of you, as we go forward together and as you go forward in your work, to bring that whole self to your work, to this community, to the world that we're all working to change. And so that is such a gift to all of us, to one another, and ultimately to people and the planet. Sustainability and technology, this is really about improving people's lives. So thank you for that. Thank you for all who have made this great event over the past few days. I will not do a list of thank yous except just to say that the GreenBiz team is extraordinary, and I hope you've had a chance to meet not just the people on the stage or at sidebar, but the many people, some of them who are Danny Kelly behind the curtain, the wizard literally behind the curtain, and so many out there at the reception, at the booth, who've come together with such joy and pride and professionalism that it is, for me, the greatest joy of being a part of this event. So just join me for the quick round of applause for the GreenBiz team, wherever they are. Thanks. And with that, I am really excited whenever we get Lisa Jackson to come to Verge. This is the 3rd time that we've had her on stage. It's always a lot to talk about, so many new pieces of this, and so much leadership that we get to share with you. And so I'll just get to it. Let's bring up the Vice President of Environmental Policy, Social Initiatives at Apple, our returning champion, Lisa Jackson.
How you doing? Wow. Wow. Look at Verge.
I know. Yeah. Our little Verge is growing up.
Yeah, big kid now.
So I'm not sure how much publicity it got. There's a lot going on in the world every day in the news. But I've heard that last week there were some new phones introduced.
We were a little busy last week in a really cool location. Yeah, you know.
But what I didn't hear at all is anything about the environmental aspects of those. What happened? Was there something that we didn't hear about that Tim didn't, for whatever good reasons, if they were in the Steve Jobs Theater, get a chance to talk about? What's new on the iPhone X and 8?
I got to give props, though, to Phil Schiller, who did the iPhone segment, and who always insists that we include a slide on the environmental attributes of the iPhone, which I think is so important. At a time when everyone just wants to see what Apple's come up with next, he insists, and he's the head of product marketing at Apple. He insists that that's part of our story. So
what is the story?
Cool. So the story is great. We promised a while ago, and we strongly believe that if what we do matters, it should show up in our products. So obviously the flagship announcement was the 2 new phones, iPhone 8 and iPhone 10. So let me give you a couple of the things that really make me feel great. We set about, iPhone 8 still has quite a bit of aluminum in the enclosure. It has glass over it, but there's aluminum there too. So we set about really focusing on the carbon intensity of that aluminum. If you notice Phil's slide, it said low carbon process. That was a combination of really cutting down on any waste aluminum and reusing aluminum in the melt for the phone, as well as hydro-powered smelting, which is a big part of aluminum's carbon footprint. So the aluminum in the iPhone 8 is 11% less greenhouse gas emissions per gram than iPhone 7 and 83% less than iPhone 6. So very happy about that. We can do EPEAT. Both phones are EPEAT Gold, so we're thrilled about that.
Was that the other phones, the 7 or 6?
Yeah, we've maintained.
So you continue that?
Yeah, maintain. Packaging, we've had a huge focus on packaging, reduction of packaging size, but also working with packaging suppliers, which is part of other news we have to share today. The packaging footprint, carbon footprint is down over 50% for both phones.
So what is that a result of?
Mainly 2 things, smaller, more efficient packaging, cutting down to a very small amount any plastic, because plastic is really the big driver of whether your packaging has any problems. We'd like to get that to 0 wherever possible. And then we have 2 new packaging suppliers who just joined part of our clean energy supplier group and have committed to go 100%. So I think it's all those things together. But that's a big change. And then probably last but not least, the number's not as impressive, but the 2 iPhones we just announced have 6% less carbon emissions per phone than previous generations. And that is a result of our supplier clean energy program. You know, for every single phone we release, we put out a product environment report. It's on apple.com/environment. And a 6% reduction due to mainly through suppliers greening their supply chain is really, you know, proof for everyone out there working on value chain work and trying to extend the influence of the company, or maybe you're in someone's value chain. It really, really matters.
Well, I want to get to the supplier clean energy program in a minute, but I want to ask you about the batteries. Okay. Specifically, there's a lot of frustration on a lot of people who, in the environmental and sustainability community, that you can't swap it out. It's stuck in there, and that therefore, you know, it's not really meeting sort of the needs of the sort of circularity that we're trying to get to. And I know there's this incredible closed loop goal that you want to get to, but from a user perspective, what's the thinking behind that? Why the battery is still glued in and inaccessible? Yeah, well, batteries are not driving cell phone or iPhone repairs. I think there's this myth out there from days long gone ago and from predecessors to the iPhone that batteries are the thing that drive you in. When they do, Apple has done a tremendous amount of work to make replacement of the battery reasonably priced, competitively priced at an Apple authorized facility, whether it's one of our Genius bars or whether you're going to an authorized certified repair shop. I just think it's part of a larger discussion, and you know, there are things I agree with our environmental friends on and things I don't. The thing about changing out a battery is when you change it out, you control what happens to it next. Right. And recycling of that battery is much more likely to happen if it's going through a repair shop or through Apple, where we can then take that battery and try to get the cobalt or the lithium out, both of which we're working really hard on, and reuse. But it's a broader, I think, misconception that being able to repair in general cuts down on e-waste. I think if you're going to look at circular, and we were really careful to dedicate ourselves to the idea of the circular economy. Repair is one piece of that. Recycling is a piece of it. But actually, you have to change the value chain, not just to get those batteries back, but to process that material and put it back into the supply chain again. And so I
you know, I think people are doing it for good reasons, and I think they think it is a customer-friendly solution. We believe the more customer-friendly solution is to build a very durable product and also make repairs affordable when you need them.
So let's talk about that closed loop, the closed loop goal that you announced, I guess it was earlier this year.
Yeah, in April. Birthday.
That said, well, you tell us what that goal is.
Yeah, so the goal is huge. You know, the idea is that we would like to make new product out of either recycled material or renewable material.
100%.
100%. 100%. We have a ways to go. But we thought...
You didn't set a target timetable, interim goal yet?
No, we haven't yet. It's something we're considering. It was something really new for Apple to set that aspirational a goal and not have in place a roadmap to know how we're going to get there. And it's been really fun within Apple to watch the engineers challenge themselves with such a big goal, and to watch the executive team say, oh, no, we didn't mean like never. We mean like, what's our plan to get there? Let's talk about all the different materials that are part of our supply chain. I was actually with a group of suppliers yesterday answering their questions on non-ferrous materials about what we'd like to see in terms of reuse of materials. We announced the goal on purpose, aspirationally, because part of what we're trying to do, obviously one of our concerns, not the only one, is mining and the impact that has on sustainability, on people's lives, and on the planet. We'd love our suppliers to come along with us so that this isn't a question of you or you, but rather you evolve to be a much better supplier for us. But that's going to take time.
Well, I mean, I think that's one of the interesting parts of this. We had a panel here yesterday with Walmart and the Air Force and a little outfit called Amazon, and talking about what it takes for big companies like that to get things to scale, and how it's not always a matter of they say how high and they say jump and the suppliers say how high. That it's a lot more complicated. What are you seeing in terms of the new kinds of partnerships or technologies or enablers? In fact, what are the in sort of technology and relationships and partnerships? Where are the biggest barriers and the biggest opportunities?
So some of the barriers are technology driven. I mean, to really enable the circular economy for consumer electronics, you have to remake some of the ways we process material. It wasn't designed to reuse tons of material. And so not only do you have to remake it, but you have to make it cost effective. I mean, I think the problem with just saying jump and how high is, yeah, anybody can do anything, but it costs money. And we have to be willing to pay that extra money. And Apple has a long history of driving a supply chain to not only produce, but to produce really efficiently and effectively. We certainly believe we can make a market. And so I think one barrier is technology. Another barrier is it has to be cost, one opportunity, if you will, challenge is to make it cost effective. That's not going to be the truth on day one. You know, when Apple moved to take PVC out of our power cords, they weren't cost effective on day one. First, we had to figure out how to do it. Then we had to find suppliers who would do it with us. And then because they knew we would be the market, they came along. The last piece of that, though, is a little bit my old job. It would also be nice if then governments say, let's move to this standard, this PVC halogen-free cord, instead of allowing competitors to come in with cheaper alternatives. So.
Does that need to be done at the government level, or could it be done at the EPEAT or UL or other kinds of certification bodies, and then let the market drive that where that just becomes the expectation, as we saw with I think a number of other kinds of, you've driven a lot of that over the years. Is that a possibility, or do we need government for there?
I think that the private sector can take it so far. I think that there is a role for government, especially around standard setting. I think that, and this is funny coming from a former regulator, but it's actually better when government allows the innovations to happen and not pick winners up front. So the places where, and I tried to do this at EPA as well, the places where you make the best policy is where you encourage and almost create a market for an innovation, like a scrubber on a power plant that wouldn't exist. The technology exists, but nobody's going to put it on if you don't ask them to do it. Very few companies will. A few leadership companies will, but then you have all these other people sort of sliding underneath the line.
Well, that sort of brings us to the Supplier Clean Energy Program. You talked about it a little bit before. How hard, or not hard, is that in terms of bringing along the, so many companies in this room and watching the live stream have done the 100% or committed to 100% in their own facilities, in their own operations, but not in their supply chains yet. And you are on your way. Where are you in that journey, first of all?
So we're, well, we have some news. We had several suppliers announce that they would go 100% clean energy, and we're announcing 6 more today, here with you, Joel. News.
Can you name them?
I can, but that's why I have my phone.
Is that, what kind of phone is that?
No, this is a 7.
Not the iPhone 14 or something.
No. If it was, I wouldn't tell you. So our 6 new ones are Corvo, Wistron, they're a final assembly, go Wistron. Mega Precision, Golden Arrow, and Uto, they are packaging, and Sunway Communications make part of the antenna assembly. So we're up to 14 now companies who have committed to go 100% renewable powered for Apple operations.
And just to put that in perspective, 14 out of
hundreds, but these are not small. We didn't start with the smallest. And we have hundreds of companies. We started a portal with information, sort of the roadmap for suppliers who want to do this. And we have hundreds who are actively engaged in saying, okay, I want to join the list. I mean, we just talked about this not quite 2 years ago. You asked how we're doing. So when we announced it, we know that our carbon footprint is 29.5 million metric tons a year. 75% of that was in our supply chain. That's why we did it. As a result of work already on the books and some work we've done, we're down 6% in carbon emissions for our, our new phones, which is a big deal because we happen to sell a lot of phones, iPhones.
Can you talk a little about the carrots and sticks that you're involved with the suppliers? What's incentivizing them to do that? Why would they do this?
The incentive is people want to be part of this. Clean energy is cheaper in many cases, and clean energy is better. It's there, it's reliable, and in some parts of the world, we actually have countries that mandate that you do something about it. China is a great example. China has said we want to see our skies blue. That means less pollution. That means addressing the threat of climate change and continuing to stay in the Paris Accords, and therefore companies are signing up. Now, one of the things they're saying is, having Apple behind us, telling our managers that we're standing with you. Some cases, co-investing even is really helpful to them.
So Apple's co-investing with?
In some cases. Actually, you don't need it in every case. In some of the larger suppliers are perfectly able to do it. And it's a combination. Sometimes it's a PPA or something similar. Sometimes it's an actual investment in a development. And sometimes it's on-site generation as well. So, we're pretty excited about where it's gone. We're at 2.8 gigawatts, 2.8 gigawatts of the 4 gigawatts that we committed to by 2020. I'm pretty excited about, those hundreds of other folks sort of coming along as well. So I really think we're on a roll. I have one other clean energy related announcement. This is about Apple itself. We committed to be 100% renewable as well. We don't do that generally through offsets. Every once in a while, there might be a need to do a little true up, but we do
outside the U.S. probably.
Yeah, absolutely. But we haven't given up on some tough markets. Japan's a great example. We are 100% renewable in 24 countries, and today I can tell you 25, and number 25 is Japan, where we are working with a local solar developer. I can try to say their name, Daini Jinryoku. That's how it goes. And they are doing 300 rooftop installations, and we use that as our clean energy. And if you know how we do clean energy, it's sort of ATM. We put as much into the account as we know we're drawing out, because in a place like Japan, we can't change the grid or purchase clean energy through a choice program. So we have to do a little bit clean energy in, clean energy out. But to get to 100% in Japan, Japan used to be one of the companies on our list that this isn't going to happen. And it's been really fun. We had one supplier, Ibiden, in Japan. They installed floating solar voltaics. We announced that, I think, this past April as well.
Wait, floating solar voltaics.
Photovoltaics, get it?
Photovoltaics.
Yeah. See, that is such a Verge joke.
Yeah.
Y'all laughed at that.
It is
That's a Verge joke. Yeah, so I mean, you know, we're getting there. We're definitely getting there. And I do think that there is incredible momentum. And I think there's a lot of times when it feels like that momentum is stopping, but the private sector has to continue to invest in the future, not the past.
So speaking of the future and the past, before we want to get to some questions from the sidebar, but before that, I want to talk about the EPA. You used to run it.
Don't hiss the EPA, hiss the leadership of the EPA.
You used to run it back in the first Obama administration, before you left there to come to Apple. What do you think, we have the business community here, the progressive business community, and that's a growing community all the time these days, who say that we're still in and we're not averting our gaze. What do you think this community should be doing right now in terms of addressing, engaging, confronting the current leadership?
You know, I think that, and I think it's already happening. As far as I know, there have been organizations of clean and sustainable businesses who've done their best to request time and attention from the new administration at EPA. I don't know that it's been incredibly successful. One of the things you do as EPA administrators, hear from a lot of people across the spectrum. I had meetings with everyone in industry, from some of the biggest companies. No one wants to call themselves a polluter, but who could potentially be big polluters, all the way to companies who were clean tech, right? And you hear on purpose, because that's what government is about, representation in our democracy from the whole spectrum. So I think you have to just keep trying. I also think you have to, EPA is an incredible reservoir, repository of data and information, including on climate change, if it's allowed to speak, if the staff are allowed to speak those words. And I think you have to give EPA ammunition. One of the things I said when I left EPA is, if I go to the private sector, and there was really only one company I'd consider going to, and I'm, you know, dreams come true sometimes, I'm there. But part of our job is to give EPA the credence to the words I certainly said when I led EPA. You do not have to choose between a clean environment and a growing and thriving economy. And in fact, you can't have one without the other.
But the answer you gave is kind of the answer you would give during normal times around, you know, that there's advocacy groups, there's lots of them on sustainability. And I don't, it seems like there needs to be something more, something perhaps a little more aggressive, maybe a little angrier, a little bit more insistent. I mean, don't you wish, and I think, you know, your CEO has been, I think, you know, stepped up in some admirable ways in talking about some of the issues, not just environmental as well. What would you like to see? Would you like to see companies getting angrier? Would you like to see them getting more vocal? What could happen here from your old vantage point?
I'm a big believer in show me. I know we live in the time of tell me, but I think a couple of things. States and local governments are still where people live and where that message is resonating. And so it's not a new philosophy, but governors and mayors are an audience that can move the, you know, morass of Washington right now. Yeah. Congress, we should not give up on. And, you know, Apple will soon be doing more to lift up the voice of even companies like ours. One of the complaints I hear occasionally, because I also run government affairs for Apple worldwide, and one of the things I hear occasionally is, you guys come and talk to us about a lot of things, but where's your voice on clean energy? Because we're certainly hearing from other voices on energy. And that's a fair criticism. I mean, Apple can speak with a different voice than a small or medium business, but small and medium businesses need to speak up as well. And it needs to be business-based. There is no reason to walk in and make the human health argument. You know, it is really sad that the human health argument is absolutely absent right now from EPA. Yeah. It's actually, it's beyond a tragedy.
It's criminal, I think, I would say.
It's the voice of human health and the environment in the administration. Yeah. And that's what it's charged to be by law. So I think, you know, if you look past that and you say, let's talk about the business opportunity, that's what we're doing. And so I think we all need to step up to work with the governors in the states where we operate, the local chambers of commerce, you know, to point out, Apple's members of lots of groups, one of them is Advanced Energy Economy, to point out where the jobs are. Because it's really easy to talk in big terms about getting rid of clean energy and helping, you know, big coal mine owners, because that's really who would get help. But it's really hard when you realize that, oh, we don't mine for coal here. You know, so that's important.
Elaine, let's get a question in quick.
Yeah, so we conducted, just as an aside, we conducted an online poll. It's very unscientific just now. And our question is, would you pay more for a phone that is repairable and upgradable for the next 10 years? 75% said yes, definitely. And so there's clearly a market that wants to drive this. We're really excited that you're going to work with your suppliers to try to make this happen. It's an awesome goal, so I want to applaud you for that, and our audience is super stoked. So that's an aside. But there's a separate question, which, Joel, I'm glad you brought up the EPA. This is a little bit more fun and a little aspirational, but we just want to understand what you think. You know, Van Jones previously mentioned that the Trump administration is proposing a 30% cut to the EPA budget. So you know that a lot of these government departments are under pressure to do more with less or something. And so the audience wants to know, if Scott Pruitt called you and said he'd grant you one wish, what would you ask for?
Let's talk about repairable and upgradable. I would wish that the professionals, the scientists, the people inside EPA who at sometimes cost to their own career and personal economics have chosen to serve the country. You know, EPA employees are public servants. That doesn't mean out of 15 or 17,000 people when I was there, you don't have a few knuckleheads. But you have a few knuckleheads. I have knuckleheads in my own family, so, you know, knuckleheads exist in the world. But by and large, the caliber of the people at EPA, the scientists there, the rigor of the analysis that they do deserves to be listened to and deserves to be put forward and not shut out and not politicized. And so I'm a believer that if you listened to it and understood it and heard it and put it forward and unshackled people and allow them to speak, you would hear, in general, really important information. On repairability, I totally agree. And the thing about the iPhone that is so cool is how many people have upgraded to iOS 11 as of yesterday? Me. I mean, it's like a new phone. You know, the whole point of what we do is that you can upgrade to new software, and every once in a while there's some things like Face ID in the new phone that you can only get if you buy the new phone. But if I don't want Face ID or I don't need it right away, I don't have to have it. I have all the other features, though, the better algorithms for the camera, the much faster software. So I totally agree that we need to think about these devices as something that we can have a long time. And studies show that that's exactly what the iPhone is. You can pass it along for a long time to friends, families. You can resell it if you like, because it's designed to be durable.
Yeah. Well, we are out of time, and I just want to end by thanking you for your leadership, but in particular for your voice, for speaking up, speaking out, both you and as a company, and really showing what's possible when technology meets sustainability, and showing how it does improve people's lives, but how you can do it in a way that honors the planet, honors the people who make them, and really does bring value. So thank you for that. Thank you for coming back and sharing your story. Please thank me. Join me in thanking Lisa
Right
Jackson.
back at you, Joe. Right back at you. Thanks.
Echoing that, what a fantastic, bold, and visionary note on which to end our final plenary for Verge 17. But before you get up from your seats, I have some very, very important announcements, which include the following. We've said it before, and I will echo it again. Please take the time while your Verge experience is fresh to share with us your feedback in the conference app. We read every word, and we really do take it seriously, both what you loved, what you'd love to see at Verge 18 in Oakland. Lunch is happening right now in the Mission City Ballroom and in the G-Lot, except for those of you who are joining us for the Urban Mobility Summit, which is just up the escalators. We'll be having our own. This is your last chance to do a tour of the microgrid and do test drives of the EVs. I think those are happening until 3 p.m. We have some phenomenal speakers in this final breakout session today, so do stick around, join those sessions, and we will have our closing reception in the courtyard over in the Hyatt from 4 to 5:30. Thank you all so much for a fantastic morning.
Hi, and that is a wrap for Verge 17, the heart of Silicon Valley, coming to you from sunny Santa Clara, California. Unfortunately, my co-host here, John, had to leave to go moderate an important summit. So I'm going to close you out, and hopefully you all took some great inspiration and will actually choose to act, do something different, think differently at the very least. And if you missed some of this, it's in an archive. It's on our YouTube channel. It's also on greenbiz.com playing right now. If you want an archived version of this to have on your own, register for Verge Virtual, which is provided through our greenbiz.com website, and you can have access to that in the future. We'll also have some clips that we'll edit and we'll put on the site as well. So anyway, I'm so glad that you were able to join us for these last 3 days, and I hope to see you again at Verge in 2018, Hawaii in June, and in Oakland in October. See you later.
Where's Jack?
He's on holiday. What do you need?
I need the temperature for pipe 5.
Ask the new guy.
The new guy?
Jack trained him.
Jack's guidance would be to maintain the temperature at negative 160 degrees Celsius.
That doesn't sound like Jack.
Actually, Jack would say, hey mate, just cool it to minus 160 and we're set. Good on ya.
Oh yeah, that's Jack.
We were founded as an organization fueled by the people of PwC to demonstrate our goodwill for those impacted by disasters, providing aid when it's needed most, to play a role in making our communities stronger, focusing our efforts on improving education in the U.S., to support innovative ideas that will solve problems, change lives, and impact generations to come, to give back to the people of PwC by supporting the charities closest to their hearts. We are the PwC Charitable Foundation.
Born from Steelcase's commitment to masterful design and unparalleled innovation, a revolutionary new way to understand, to quantify your entire company's workplace experience. Introducing Steelcase Workplace Advisor. Through precise sensing, Workplace Advisor delivers data you can trust, measuring your office workflow and allowing you to analyze how, when,